They're like, I'm just getting little clicks from you, like you're opening your push to chat and then it's closing.
Sorry, my wife just got home, so I had to step away. Did you need something from me, or?
Jim, we're good. We just need to hear from Rodney. If Tony can come, he can just put in the chat, maybe in the Cursive Strand chat, and he can keep working on his mic issues.
While they are doing that, just a reminder, at some point here, I'm going to open Meeseeks back up. If Meeseeks is loud, just right-click on Meeseeks, and you can adjust their volume. But right now, they are server muted to keep it quiet.
Okay, can you guys hear me now?
That was golden.
Okay, sorry, that was weird. It kept on setting key bindings that were already taken, so it was opening up other things. But yeah, Tony is not. I don't think Tony is going to show up today. I just called him and he didn't answer.
All right, cool. So yeah, we might as well push forward with what we've got and kind of start everything rolling. So in general, I don't expect this to be a whole lot of traditional D&D today. I'd like to get a big understanding of what everybody is looking forward to playing, what everybody is looking for, and kind of throw out a little bit about myself as well as what we can all expect from each other. So there's a lot of just kind of paperwork almost. Just getting through some of the motions to get everything started so we can have a smooth everything that follows. So in general, if you end up with any questions at any given point in time, please never hesitate to ask me. Communication is everything. And playing online, a lot of communication is already lost. We have to do everything we can not to lose any more. So if you end up with any questions, please never hesitate to ask me. You can message me on Discord. You can ask us just in voice chat. There's a lot of ways. I am not opposed to giving out my information if you in particular need like a more private way of contacting me. But with that in mind, my name is Jared. I go by J-Rod, Marathustra, Marathusala, Mara, DM, Lorekeeper. I will answer to almost anything. The last NPC that you talk to. So there's a lot of ways to kind of phrase things to me. I don't really care what you call me. If you were talking to me, I'll probably answer you. So with a lot of things like that in mind, again, please never hesitate to try to contact me if you have any questions. And almost any name that you've ever gotten from me is perfectly usable. As far as things go for you all, normally when I have people join my campaigns, I have a new player information sheet. And I'm about to link it here. So that sheet just kind of collects a lot of different things, and it tries to give me like a papered version of things that you might be looking for. In the long run, you don't necessarily have to fill that out. I'm probably going to ask a lot of those questions today at some point to try to get the name that you prefer to be called. Most of the time, you will be called the name of your character. Usually, it's probably going to be limited to I'll say your name when I'm saying hello to you, and then everything for the rest of that day is going to be your character, and then I'll say your name when I'm saying goodbye to you. Not necessarily going to use a lot of those things. If you have preferred pronouns, that's a place to list it for me so I can make sure to have things on top. In general, I do what I can to they, them, pretty much everybody. As far as things go, I, for a lot of reasons, avoid those things. You'll hear some of my NPCs will use pronouns, others will use the they, them, theirs. So in general, you can kind of pick up on those things. I try to be understanding. If I slip up, I am very sorry. But in general, I try to work with those things. And that's among part of why I try to collect that information. And then that sheet just has some kind of basic stuff where a lot of it won't necessarily be useful, as we'll kind of be going over it today. That's often like a primer to like a solo session 0. But one of the things at the bottom of it is one of the more important things, that is a RPG consent checklist, pulled from Monty Cook games and people far wiser than myself.
All right,
But
so you just want us to go through this Google form right now? Just get it done?
you don't necessarily have to do it now. We're kind of going to cover a lot of this stuff. I'm just linking these things. If you have specific things that, if you've got the time that you can fill it out, even better. Hopefully, I'll take notes that will include everything that kind of covers that. But I'm just kind of going over these things because they're all stuff that usually adds some amount of information that is extremely useful to me. So the next one that I just linked there, that's the RPG consent checklist. A lot of those things will never come up in my games, but it's a great way to understand that there are things that I will never expect, and some people have issues with. And it's a great way to bring up the conversation that, in the same way I said, I'm willing to give out a lot of my contact information. If you know there's things that you want to avoid, filling that out and making sure that I get a hold of it is a great way to make sure that we avoid stuff. Part of this conversation will go over what is effectively our. Oh man, my brain always goes blank while I'm talking.
No worries. I know you're kind of juggling a few things here.
I can't even think of the name of. It's just the social contract. There we go. So that's like a lot of things that kind of build the social contract. And in general, that's going to be what we go over. But like for instance, in most of my worlds, sex is not going to be part of the issues that we will ever role play. Most people are trying to survive. So if you see people in the tavern, there's probably no room to actually like have a big like let's hit on an NPC. I'm not extremely interested in role playing those things. In general, I'm not necessarily opposed to people who want to role play this or that. Um, but there's a lot of room where when stuff comes up, it is often going to be a fade to black. If you never want it to come up, I almost need you to let me know ahead of time. So in general, there is a certain level of certain things might show up, and we'll kind of touch on a few of those things to try to feel out like where my general social contract is, and then kind of how we can form it to this group in particular to kind of cover what everybody is looking for. And then we'll kind of touch on things like Roll20, D&D Beyond, and Discord, the different expectations from all of us, as well as different roles that like players can do to assist the smooth happening of the game. And then we'll kind of kick it around to you guys, and then we'll kind of round out things with a character creation. But for now, if everybody is good, I am going to unmute Meeseeks, so we just have a little bit of background as far as things go there. Usually, I want you to have Meeseeks kind of adjusted so it's background music. You can't hear it, but it's like in your subconscious. And if we decide to go with something like Curse of Strahd, it is much more important to have something like that than like anywhere we might go. But generally, I use Meeseeks as like a subtle way to play with the tension. Actually, realistically, with the session 0, I'm not even going to bother with it today. But if I can, Badger, may I ask, what is your name? What do you prefer to be called?
Brendan's my real name. Badger is also fine.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, I'm going to end up using Brendan until we have a character for you, and then it will turn into your character's name most of the time. And then, Niletech, what is your name? Perhaps they have stepped away from their computer.
That's Caitlin. We can go back to her though.
And Starspawn, what was your name?
Jim.
And I got Tron, Rodney, and then
And
we
that's right.
have Beekeepers, Tony. And then I feel like, oh man, I didn't actually write down the other one's name who was driving.
Search Headwind is Theo, but Theo is yeah, like I said, Theo's really excited to keep playing in the future, but just busy, and they're a very experienced D&D player, so we'll benefit a lot more from these sessions than Theo will. But this is laying the groundwork for us to do future games as well.
Also, hey, I'm Caitlin. Sorry, I don't know what was happening with my push to talk. My keyboard stroke wasn't working, but my name's Caitlin. You can call me that or Kate. Yeah.
Excellent.
Is my push to talk stuck on? Right
It
now?
looks like it now.
How do I fix it?
Under the voice and video, you might have the release time set to a really long time period. So I think I have my release delay set to like 54 milliseconds. I feel like that usually covers my mental releasing the key while I'm still talking.
Awesome. Thanks.
So Discord is my all-around communication device. It is far more useful to me than pretty much anything else. Though I will try to respond on anything. Among things to suggest is private messaging me if you want to X card something. If there's ever something going on in game and you just want to get past it, private messaging me an X is a pretty simple way to do so. If it seems like I did not notice it, just ask for like a break. One, it's hard for me to remember to take breaks, even with clocks and timers set to take regular interval breaks. They are really, really good for everyone. But if it feels like I am not noticing an X and you want to skip something, ask for a break, and then it's easier to get my attention. On that same kind of idea, part of why I do push to talk is that I keep Discord on one of my screens. So if somebody presses their mic, I can usually spot that somebody is trying to say something. And that means if you don't get a chance to actually say it, or if you sit there silently with it pressed, I can stop. I can ask everybody else to stop, and then I can call on you. So I use the push to talk a lot like a raised hand. Among other things, I also have a pet peeve against hearing people cough and sneeze. Inside of Discord, I have pinned links that are effectively private to this game. Currently, it's all just named Curse of Strahd. A vague conversation Rodney and I had was that you guys might want to do Curse of Strahd or Candlekeep Mysteries. So currently, it's just named that generically right now. If you guys and when you all name yourselves and kind of create a name for the adventuring party, that's what all of this will be named. But basically, if anybody is unfamiliar with Roll20, in the kind of top center, you'll see like a hashtag with a voice box, a bell, and then a push pin, and then a person. And that push pin will link you to anything that's basically pinned. That's going to include most of the pertinent links that will ever come up for the channel, and it's usually a pretty short list. Uh, Probably the only time like temporary stuff will arrive there is very important campaign related stuff that you might want to actually like cycle back to, but often that's inside of the actual game itself too. Um, and then the other location that you can find stuff inside of the Discord that's very useful is just way up at the top. It's the second channel down, and that's simply D&D resources. That just links to a lot of different things that can be useful. Beyond 20, those two different things that I posted today, my actual Google Drive with a lot of different stuff that you might want access to. That's just more generic stuff that may be useful at some point. Um, and then two below that channel, there's a channel called Rolling with Avray. That's one of the other places that we can do rolls without having to log into Roll20. But anything that needs to be rolled pretty much needs to be rolled in one of those two places. And I see you all are pretty much inside of the Roll20 already, so we're kind of going to switch over to that. That should cover everything with Discord. If you end up with questions there, please don't hesitate to ask me. How much experience does everybody in chat right now have with Roll20?
I've played a couple games in Roll20.
Yeah, I
Getting used
played.
to voices. Was that Rodney?
That was.
Excellent.
Yeah,
And what
I
were you
played
thinking?
I played a campaign for a bit with people, and a few with roughly the same group, a few different like one-offs using Roll20. It's been a while though, a couple years, but
I think for Caitlin and I, our first time was last week, so it's still pretty fresh, thankfully, from last week. But we are pretty much brand new. Or 2 weeks ago.
Gotcha. That was with Kruger.
Yeah, that was with Kruger.
Is one of you Walshy on Roll20?
Yeah, I'm Badger / Walshy, same person. Brendan.
So right now I'm just giving you all access to some of these characters. At present, we're not going to do a lot with them, but the real important spots to kind of see around in Roll20. Just like right off the bat, are effectively a little picture I just sent to Discord. Shows you like top right, there's two really important things. The journal, I think that's actually second to the right for you all, and that gives you access to like there's a player drop down, and you'll see characters and then handouts. So those are two important spots to kind of land as far as those right hotkeys go. And then on the left side of the screen, it's important to have like the measuring device, the actual rolling dice, looks like the polyhedron D20. But those are all very useful things to see and feel out in this general Roll20 setup here. As far as things go, this is like a generic landing area for me. I will usually have the date. It's a circle when I press Alt, but with a square around it, so you know what general date you guys are on, and it allows you to watch the candle move by. And then this gives us a place for information to kind of be kept around like your general world map, and allows us just a little more like seamless place to drop and leave everybody without necessarily seeing what I'm editing between time. But those are the big things for Roll20. Let's see. Has everybody clicked the link for the D&D Beyond? When Kruger ran you through last week, did like Brendan and Kate, did the both of you have a chance to play around with D&D Beyond?
I did work with Rodney to kind of try and make some characters. We kind of ran out of time though, so I did get to learn, through that, and I just kind of panicked. We used a pre-built last time, so I did mess around with it, but we didn't have time to like create full-fledged characters.
And how about for yourself, Kate?
Oh, there it is. Yeah, pretty much same here. I messed around with it a little bit, but yeah, I was having trouble logging in last time. So, but I finally was able to make an account and everything.
Excellent. So among the things that we'll kind of play around with a little bit later in all of this is how general character creation will go through. In particular, newer people, I prefer to keep things very simple as far as character creation goes, but I do like to roll dice. So I try to push the actual like stat creation into a few different options. But I will basically kind of put it forward to the four of you to choose how this campaign generates stats. And we'll just kind of get to that shortly here. At present, though, somebody have a question? Did you have a thought there, Jim?
I might need to change my push to talk button.
Oh, you're good. So as far as things go, that's kind of those are the big three things that we will use. D&D or Beyond 20 links two of those things. So once we have characters created on D&D Beyond, you can click and roll dice over on Roll20. For what it's worth, I'll basically just try to, on some level, ask Kate and Brendan if when you have your characters created, if we can have like some time to actually sit back and make sure that you all understand everything. But basically, the more questions you have, the more time I'd like to just allot to making sure you two have like one-on-one time to make sure that you feel comfortable with it. But does everybody have Beyond 20 installed right now? It'll be like a they call it an extension.
It's a Chrome browser extension. All right, yeah, I can get that up in 20 seconds.
Yep. Under Chrome or under Firefox, you can find it. I have the link I can drop. But it's pretty simple to find if you just search for it. So that should take you to their website if you click that link in Discord. And then it allows you to follow it to the Firefox or the Chrome.
Okay. And just so I can know what our goals are for like the beginning of the game here, are we trying to create like a random character in the next minutes? And then just roll some dice for it? I'm just confused on where we're going next because I don't want to hold anyone back too much.
No, you're good. You're not going to hold anybody back here. We're going to go over a few more things, just kind of campaign related. And then I'm going to kind of turn it over to you all to see if there's any other thoughts, kind of social contract related. And then we're going to start character creation as a group because I would like you all to basically be able to play around together in making the group like one unit, giving yourselves backstories together, making sure that if there are people who are open to what they are playing and people who already have a very particular idea and want to limit what they play, so you guys can kind of have a well-rounded group based on that. It's very useful to have everybody create characters together. So as far as what will most of the time be my job, I write a background setting that you all will interact with. Essentially, I will try to have like usually it's 3 or so encounters prepared for any given day. Sometimes it'll be like 3 to 5. Sometimes you guys will be coming up to like a big encounter and it's pretty much only one big thing that might be the entire day. So a lot of things will kind of be focused around that idea where I will almost be preparing like a background world, the setting for you all to interact with. And once you start making choices, the world around you is going to start to react. Part of what I say that for is that every choice you all make will matter. Um, if you have a town to save where some of their kids have gone missing and you go after the kids, something else that you are not able to do right then is going to change the way that world is. And almost every choice is that idea of there's never a correct choice. There's the choice that you make in the setting that you have before you. So there's a large level of your choices are going to matter as far as the world at large. When I'm playing as enemy characters that you might fight against, in general, I like to remind people if they use language, if I'm talking to you with them, there's probably a way that you can talk your way out of a battle, just as much as there's probably a way that you can talk yourself into a battle. So there's a lot of room for your choices in the microcosm of an encounter. Make big decision or big results as things kind of flow out. And that's a lot of where I'll interact. I try to be as um, non-committed to the enemies as possible. Sometimes an enemy might be somebody who is vicious and they are going to go for a kill if they have a chance to go for a kill. It doesn't mean it's what I'm always going to do. A lot of times you will see that I roll for creatures to attack stuff via dice. I change the dice kind of differently. So, like, if a creature like a beast runs up on a group of 4 of you, I'm going to roll a d4 and it's just going to go down the initiative order to tell me who it's going to attack. And then the next turn, it might be like a d6, and one of you is 1, 2, 3 because you've done the most damage, or one of you is 1, 2, 3 because you were the creature it last attacked, or one of you is 1, 2, 3 because you're bloodied. And then everybody else is like a small chance, but creatures that act erratically, I like to follow the dice. So there's a lot of things like that. But in general, I try to be as generic in how I play creatures as possible. So I am not your opponent. If I ever feel like I am your opponent, please let me know. It's not the goal. If you all want to pull stuff off, it often requires actually chatting with me so we can figure out how to make very creative stuff happen. As far as players go, what I expect out of you all is the most creativity you can bring to the game. Anybody who saw inside a chat, I throw those dice down, usually at the 1 hour mark to the game. Does everybody see those in Discord?
All right, what are we looking for? Can you repeat that?
Just like 9 dice. It's like a bicycle, the world, a ruler.
I think I see everything on the left. We're talking about the left-hand side and the top. I'm at the main screen with the map.
For Discord, I just re-uploaded it. Bam, there we go. So damn, I actually blanked on why I was bringing these up. These dice are what I use to start off stuff with inspiration. They are purely used as starting to get the improvisation rolling so we can start our brains being creative.
Okay, see that now.
So in general, what I think with those is a picture is worth 1,000 words. Should be 9,000 words right there. And that's one of those things, like I will start that off and everybody has an opportunity to tell a story about their character's past that informs us a little bit more about who that character is. And it's an opportunity to one, earn an inspiration, and two, start the actual flow of creativity. Part of why I say this is a lot of solutions are all about being creative. A lot of times, if I'm creating puzzles, I don't have a solution in mind. So it's often up to hearing you all talk about how to solve a problem. And eventually somebody will say something. And I'm like, yeah, you are right. That's how we solve that problem. And then if you guys actually go through and somebody like does that, that's going to be the solution. So a lot of things are kind of created that way where it's all about being creative and see what you guys can come up with. That includes like when we come to doing checks. Uh, Anybody who comes from like Critical Role is used to hearing them like yell out insight check. If you ask for a check like that, you're going to get a high DC because you're just telling me you want an insight check. If you tell me, I'm watching Mara's chest, is he breathing quicker? Do I see any beads of sweat forming over his brow? Does it seem like his eyes are jumping left, right, all around? Do I think he's telling the truth? That's a way to tell me that you're insight checking this guy and you know what you're looking at, and it's going to lower the DC because your mind is focused in on that. You might be able to pick up his insight, but you're not going to pick up something else in the room. So like the more creative you are on how you narrate stuff will often lower DCs. And that's one of those reasons why I try to say like your creativity matters. Um, the more you have something in mind, the more you can come to solutions. In general, I'll try to have a good understanding of your characters. I do ask players to be the master of their characters. As much as possible, that means that I'm going to try to roll with what you say and trust that you know and understand how to use your character. For people who are newer and they need more help, I'll try to have a more of an understanding of that. Part of what that includes is like during the off time between sessions, I try to familiarize myself with the spells that you use to make sure that I have a fresh and current understanding of them. As much as possible, I try to be on top of characters, but as much as possible, I also expect players to do what they can to understand their characters as well. Um, as much as possible, I like to know how many people we're going to have as soon as possible. So if somebody expects to be missing, the sooner that you can let me know, the better. Obviously, it helps to know an hour ahead of time, but it's better to know 24 hours ahead of time. If you know 2 weeks ahead of time, that's ideal. But in general, like as much as possible, if somebody has to cancel, it really helps to know ahead of time that you need to cancel. Um, I'm usually open to playing with 3 people as a minimum. I generally try to say half of the group, but sometimes like 2 people who are good at role playing together, 2 people can be good enough that it keeps things going. But there's a certain level of you don't want a few people to be able to make big group decisions just as much as I don't want a session where people just kind of sit around and aren't interacting. And then in general, I roll pretty like combat focused games. It's not going to be like all combat. There's certainly a lot of role play to things, but I definitely think this is a combat game. I think strategic combat is an important part of it. On some level, I don't necessarily want you all strategizing in the midst of combat, because there's a certain level of you can only speak for like 6 seconds during combat, but that doesn't mean that you all don't strategize generically together as an adventuring group during your downtime. So there's a certain level of like kind of playing on a seesaw of how much planning you do like in the middle of a combat and how much you yell out during combat. But there is a certain level, like if you are asking for an NPC to surrender, I'm not going to respond until its turn. So um, Jim goes right after, if Jim goes right after the NPC and he tells this NPC to surrender, you all have to go through your turns before you're going to get a reply from the NPC. So those are like kind of the big rundowns. Should give you kind of an understanding of how I play a lot of things. Um, in general, like NPC and town wise, I try to have NPCs prepared so you can learn a lot about them. I'm not necessarily big on shopping. I try to be pretty forward with like you're gonna get a price from an NPC. If you want to help them accomplish something, you can usually get a better deal. But I'm not necessarily big on haggling kind of thing. If that's the type of thing that you're interested in, please let me know. But in general, I don't like necessarily take a lot of time to worry about like the bookkeeping of like how much ammunition you have. Occasionally, if you're like shooting an arrow by a cliff and you miss, I'm gonna tell you that arrow's gone. Um, but I feel like a lot of like that bookkeeping is not necessarily the most interesting part of the game. If players create stuff like rangers and you want to be important for stuff like the survival side of it, we can definitely play a little bit different of a game for that quality. But those are kind of the things like try to let me know what kind of game you're looking for so we can all make sure to play the game that everybody's looking for. Does anybody have any thoughts at present with kind of those little bits thrown out there?
Feeling good, ready to get into it.
Yeah, I was just gonna say I'm not new. I've played a number of different characters in the past, so uh, I'm happy to let other people go first if we're trying to construct a team, and I'll fill a role as needed.
Oh yeah, that all sounds good to me. I'm also just checking my mic and seems like it's working now.
Yeah, that was golden and it released on time too.
Nice, nice.
So those that I just dropped, that's just a .docker and ODT, depending on like what like word processors people might use. Those are just some kind of generic rules about again how character creation will kind of play out. With that all in mind, like in general, to summarize, I effectively ask that you create a PC who wants to adventure and somebody who wants to adventure with this group. If your character's life goal is to become a blacksmith, they're going to become a blacksmith, and I'm going to have you create a new character who wants to be an adventurer. I've had people who want to fish, and I don't understand why you would come into a D&D session and try to spend 4 hours fishing. I understand that there's a lot of different ways to play different games. That's part of why I try to describe it as this is like an explore, meet NPCs, figure out how you can help the world around you, and or just walk around until stuff attacks you. Like there's always a solution. Like adventurers live an adventurous life. So that's just the first big rule is make an adventure. And that's part of having everybody kind of make a decision together is it's a good way to tie yourselves together. You don't always have to be like lifelong friends, but on some level, like having an adventure group that has some level of familiarity together is really good. Whether it's like 2 or 3 people know each other and there's like 2 or 3 groups like that in the whole group, it's kind of up to you all how to tie yourselves together like that. The second point on that is the 3 general ways that I like to do character stats. The very generic point buy. Point buy is a solution that works out for everyone. You can make what you want. So that's kind of the simple fallback. The 27, 25, 23 is basically a system where you roll for 3 different stats, and those 3 stats give you a mirror. So if you roll 46, subtracting or keeping the highest 3, and your highest roll is an 18, that's going to be subtracted from the 27, and you're going to have a 9 as your other stat. So you'll have an 18 and a 9. And basically, what it comes down to is by doing a subtraction highest to lowest like that, you end up with 75 points in stats. If you roll low, you'll get a higher stat in response. If you roll high, you'll get a lower stat in response. But everybody will end up with the same number of stat points. And then the third one is what I've tended to do for a while, is having everybody roll a stat, and then you combine those together to make the whole group's stat. So with 4 of you here today, we might do something like have each of you roll twice, and we'll drop the we'll keep like the actual lowest stat of all of the ones that you roll, and then we'll drop the next 2 lowest, and then keep the highest 5. But in general, like that's one of those things where everybody would then have, say, like 16, 15, 15, 14, 12, 11, 7. I feel like I did too many stats there. Does everybody understand those ways of generating stats? Do you have any questions on those?
Yeah, one question I have is because I'm really used to just kind of just taking like I think it's what like the standard array or whatever it is. That's typically kind of what I'm used to and what I've used in the past.
Yeah, so like standard array you can generate out of the point buy. And that's one of the reasons why I like point buy, is because if somebody wants to do standard array, they can grab that up. And it still allows some semblance of like min maxers can like grab 15 points in a stat and they'll get an 8 for a opposite stat. So that's one of the big reasons why I like point buy, is it allows everybody to modify things a little bit more. So somebody who wants a higher stat, they end up with overall less stats, but they get like the important 3 that they want to maximize, kind of thing. But other than that, like all of the rolled systems effectively have a higher average than taking otherwise. So it makes like a little bit more heroic characters right off the bat.
That's good feedback. I didn't know that.
And then again, if you all want to do just standard array, I am perfectly happy with that. Part of why I say the point buy is I feel like that covers standard array. So if you guys wanted to just do standard array, that is perfectly fine. It makes perfectly good adventurers, and you'll still be, incredibly powerful as you become essentially gods. but that's a decision I'll eventually ask you all to make here. So for now, if you end up with questions on those, don't hesitate to ask again. But otherwise, we'll kind of like push forward until you actually have to use one of those for character creation here. So listed on there, I have like PHB. All of that is good to go. If you want to use something from like Xanathar's, Tasha's, Eberron, just ask me. In the long run, part of why I say ask me is that some stuff we may modify in the future, but in general, I'm pretty open to it. A lot of the biggest problems with some stuff like that comes into the game when some people are playing very casually for the fun of playing their character, and somebody else wants to play a min-maxed character, and combat becomes the type of thing where I'm either going to threaten to kill the person who's casually playing themselves, or I'm never going to challenge the person who's min-maxing. So part of that is always like this idea, like if you want a challenge from combat and everybody else is just making very like fun characters to enjoy the world, you might benefit from not min-maxing, because then you can still find the challenge without like risking your party's lives at all turns. I hope that makes sense, but that's one of those things where we have to recognize at some point there are builds out there that, yeah, you win at D&D, but how do we make this fun for everybody? The fourth one is all about starting gold. It doesn't matter. We'll probably be starting at a lower level. As far as things go, I'll actually kind of put that up to you guys as well. I really enjoy level 1 through 4. They give you a lot of room to feel your character when they're vulnerable. By the time you're 5, you're a lot less vulnerable. By the time you're 10, it's really hard to die. So there's a certain level of it's fun to play through them all, and it's kind of up to everybody. It's really good for learning your character to start lower as well.
Does anybody have any preference there?
About how we're going to do the character creation. So I've been trying to follow everything. I mean, I'm trying to whatever can streamline it.
Just specifically on level, if you want to actually start off, at a higher level, I guess, and have a little bit more strength and everything like that, or if you wanted to start from the very beginning at level 1.
I've found the early levels are fun, and we have some new people, and I haven't played in a long time, so
Yeah, I'm
I'd
fine
be
with
fine
level 1
starting low
too.
level.
Caitlin, anything from you?
No, yeah, level 1 makes sense to me.
Awesome. Yeah, I think we're all good for level 1 then.
So starting off level 1, like the 5th point on that one is all about like healing potions are something you can buy when you're creating your character. So if you have gold, you can pick up like a normal healing potion for those 50 gold. Later on, if you're recreating a character, you might be able to buy one of the other ones. Certain races limitation, flying characters. I really have the biggest hatred for flying for online play. It's so much easier to represent flying in real life. I don't think virtual tabletops do a good job of showing things in the third dimension. And realistically, I do everything I can to avoid flying stuff. Flying gets to be where it's very theater of the mind. And in theater of the mind, actually, that's actually a different point that I wanted to bring up. Is anybody especially visual? I've come to terms with the understanding that some people like cannot visualize theater of the mind, and that is a big thing to know ahead of time.
I have no problem. I enjoy theater of the mind, but I like a little hint of what something's supposed to look like. I guess mostly with like in terms of the map.
I gotcha. Yeah, so often when I'm talking about theater of the mind, often I do have like a generic like parchment background that I'll still throw stuff on the map. But part of what I go for with theater of the mind is usually if something's theater of the mind, it's meant to be a very simple combat. You guys are just going to like wipe it out real quick. And it's a lot more gray area for like do epic shit. Um, if you're like, oh, am I close enough to run up to it? I've got a movement speed of 35 feet. I'm like, yeah, of course. I'm not going to measure that. It's very generic. You could be 60 feet from it. You could be 35 feet from it. It doesn't really matter. We're going to let you do something epic. And that's kind of how I envision theater of the mind. It will tend to be the type of thing where we're going to like bend stuff to make sure that you guys can do it, because it's usually something where like almost setting up takes more time than it's worth. But often like I'll have pictures of like a creature to drop to kind of like show you what you're seeing, or I might just like draw like a box or whatever, like to give you like a very simple childlike drawing. I have amazing art skills of like what you might be seeing before you. But in general, theater of the mind is a lot more open to interpretation, and that's part of why I like to use it when I do use it, is it's a last minute thing, and it allows you all to shine a little bit more in like be a little bit bigger in the stuff that you want to do.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds cool. I was just picturing more in the games I've played online in the past. Like I can I can picture encounters where it's like, oh, you're in the sub basement of a castle and it's like multiple rooms and you're trying to get an NPC out of somewhere, and yeah, just more like complicated situations like that, I guess. For the most part, I'm totally fine with just visualizing stuff.
Yeah, something like that, I can almost always guarantee you I'm going to have some sort of map that I've either harvested from the internet or something that I have like roughed out. I'm not opposed to using like the old school style of like hashed out dungeons. But in general, if we're talking about multiple rooms, I probably have something for you all to be on a battle map. Um, yeah, so like again, not big on flying creatures, unearthed arcana. Once it's published, it's the type of thing that we can talk about it. I think Elven Accuracy and Bountiful Luck just have too much re-rolling. A lot of people hate Lucky. I think Lucky is an amazing skill, and it at least limits you. And I think that's a huge part about having re-rolls is to have them limited. Um, and then again, like as far as custom lineages goes, I feel like a lot of that is just about like chatting about what you're looking for. Um, I want to say offhand, just don't even like look at it. But in the long run, as long as you're not like super optimizing a character while other people are making very casual, fun characters, that's the big thing. Is to remind people that if you were going super optimal and other people are not, you might find yourself not having fun because you made somebody who was too powerful to ever challenge. And then I've got, oh, did I not? I've got a list of some of my house rules. I guess I managed to not save the one where I had like the inspiration written down. Part of how I do inspiration is like collecting points of it. Um, so like at the start of a game, I show those dice, and you can tell a story about yourself for an inspiration, and then somebody can do a recap for inspiration. But you can collect multiple inspirations, and then you can modify a d20 plus or minus up to the number of inspirations that you have. So if you collect 10 and I roll to hit you and you want to make sure that it misses you, you can modify that die. If you roll and you think you know the creature's AC and you're 2 below it and you've got 10, you can use 2 to make sure that you hit, or even 3 if you wanted to really make sure that you hit. So I like to do inspiration like that where you collect it over time. Um, and it also, again, encourages people to tell stories with those dice. The other things are almost all related to summons. Um, the simple thing with that is you're limited to 2 summons for speed's sake. And most of the time, anything that you summon is going to be like on some level, like played out by me. And that's one of those things like if you intend to summon pixies, I'm going to play the pixies, they're not necessarily going to turn people into T-Rexes. So like builds like that where you're assuming that you can make a lot of T-Rexes or whatnot, it's probably not going to happen. And if it is, it's going to kind of respond to one of those things where we're like, all right, you've beat D&D. How do we make this fun for everybody? So I think those are the big things. If everybody is ready inside of D&D Beyond, the big question is, oh, I skipped over, I like to roll hit points for every single level. That includes level 1. We re-roll ones, but it makes characters vulnerable, and you eventually will have more hit points than not. So that's one of the qualities I feel like makes your characters a little bit more interesting. Stat-wise, though, do you all have thoughts? Do you want to do just standard array?
Whatever is fastest to get us kind of rolling and into the game, I'm for.
I'm down to do the roll where we all roll. Was it like 4d6, and get like that way we have at least better stats too, starting off at level 1.
Oh, one of the things I meant to ask, like, I feel like when you were starting all of this, I heard something where some people only had 2 hours to play. What kind of game time are you all expecting from that?
I'm flexible with like 2-3 hours.
Yeah, I feel like I'm good with like a standard-ish 3, 2 to 3, kind of however long.
I think just based on my past experience playing remote games, I would have trouble if it goes past the standard 2 to 3. I think without the in-person like face-to-face, it gets tough unless it's like, the climax of a campaign and you're all really invested or something.
Yep, I'm being in line with everyone else.
Gotcha. So normally my games are 4 hours, and I say plus or minus an hour, and I tend towards the 5 hours before I tend towards the 3 hours. So what I'll shoot for here is I feel like we can probably set up for like that 2 hour mark, and we'll probably tend towards like 2.5 hours most days, and kind of see how that goes. And while I have always worked for tips, you all are welcome to pay more, but I'll probably just do like $10 for a normal session on something like that. And we'll kind of like move forward like that with like a 2 hour idea for $10. $5 an hour is usually what I shoot for as far as like per player type of thing. Has everybody thought about, do you want to go into Curse of Strahd? Do you want to go into Candlekeep Mysteries? Curse of Strahd is like gothic horror. It's a lot more moment to moment, high tension, high stress. Whereas like Candlekeep Mysteries is almost episodic, where there might be long jumps in time between one adventure and the next. And Strahd like doesn't do that. Strahd's almost like 3 weeks or like a month, and the whole campaign happens in character in that time.
I like the first one.
Yeah, game structure aside, the Strahd seems good for a spooky season. So
Yeah, I dig the Halloween connection.
I'm good with whatever.
All right, cool. So yeah, if we are going to do the dice, as far as things go, if everybody inside of Roll20, the easiest thing to do is to type /R space 4d6 KH3. And I'm going to have each of you roll twice, and we're going to drop the second and the third lowest.
Sorry, Mark. Could you throw that in the Curse of Strahd discourse channel? The command that is.
So that's it over there. And that will roll 4d6, and then it's going to keep the highest 3 for each of those rolls. And you'll have to do that in the roll 20. Already a 16 and an 18, or a 16 and a 17.
Yeah, that's pretty killer.
I had one group that was 16, 16, 15, 15, 14, 11.
I like this spread because I mean it's kind of balanced. I mean you have like those two really high numbers and then like the other two numbers are pretty reasonable.
So right now I think I see each of you has rolled once. Can you all roll one more time, please? All right, so I'm pretty sure I recorded those correctly, where your stat line is going to be 17, 16, 14, 14, 13, 9. So, if anybody, I feel like Jim said you're more experienced, you're more open to kind of filling in anything if there's gaps. Was that correct?
Yeah, I haven't played in at least a year and a half. So I'm guessing Rodney's more experienced than I am, but I have played like several different types of characters, like across race and class. So um, and I'd be happy to try something new too. So I'll fill in with whatever would kind of round out the group.
I gotcha. I feel like the big thing that I would kind of say there is that at least maybe Rodney and yourself have multiple potential characters that you have thoughts on already. Um, Kate or Brandon, are either of you, have you thought about characters that you would like to play? Do you have multiple characters in mind? Like, where are your brains at as far as what you would like to play in like a horror campaign?
Sort of looking for some inspiration in that, but sorry, I keep exiting out of my thing. But I mean, I had like a geez, okay. I had a couple characters going on the Beyond, but yeah, that's it.
Oh,
I have the creative side thought of. I just want help on the stats because I don't want to just. If I try and micromanage the stats, I'll be here forever. So just having inspiration to get that done quicker or make choices in that, that would help me get decided sooner.
well, before I go back to Kate, then what were you thinking about?
Let's see. I had a like a half orc barbarian going on, and yeah, I just did whatever the autofill stats are with
Gotcha.
the
So,
rolling
like,
with all.
a barbarian's very important to have. What is it? Their constitution and strength, I feel like, creates their armor. So they're pretty simply like a 2 stat character like that, and everything else gets pretty open as to what you might do. It is never wrong to have dexterity, even if you don't have an attack based on it, because your initiative is at very least always dexterity based. So if you're thinking of somebody combat related like a barbarian, those are like the three key stats for you. Probably having like the 17 or the 16 as your strength, and then your con, and then like a 14 dexterity. Obviously, with these stats, you can't really go wrong with your mental stats. Um, but like intelligence is often how you remember stuff. Wisdom is often being able to think of the right thing to say. And then charisma is kind of your ability to be charming or not be like rough like sandpaper. So that's like kind of a rough like breakdown of how those stats would go. Um, but I don't mean to say anything bad, but I was actually speaking to Brandon. Like, what was your class that you were thinking of?
Well, I had a pretty much copy of Caitlyn, so I'd like to go for something different. So we're not like on the same, looking for the same character. I'm open to a lot of different ones. I was thinking about a ranger. I was thinking about some of the magical ones, but I was heard that they're a little harder as a beginning player, and when you're lower level. So I'd be up for some inspiration on the class, and then I can think of a more like the creative side and fill it all in.
I would
So
say it's definitely easier to learn the game not messing around with too many spell slots. Like not the non like quote unquote wizard classes do have spells they can use, but it tends to be more limited and like easier to manage.
I always try to tell people, or ask rather, how much time will you invest in your character outside of the game? If you have time to read spells and try to figure out what spells do, casters aren't necessarily a bad thing. The big thing is actually knowing what you're choosing. And in particular, if you want to play a caster and you know that you have time to like study the spells on some level, there's casters who can switch them out so you can't make mistakes with them. Where there's other casters who, once they choose, there's a certain level of like you're locked into that. I am very open with everybody's characters until you're level 5 or so. If you feel like you made a mistake, let's fix it. Let's keep that character alive. And the history be damned. So like don't worry too much about making choices. But Brandon, if you think you can invest time in learning spells, that's not a reason to keep you away from a spellcaster. But spells are almost like a whole extra third of this game. There's like all of the rules, all of the combat rules, and then all of the rules for spells.
Okay. So I think I'll avoid one then. I'm really into like the creative part of the character, and that's what I want to be thinking about during the week because that's not stressful. I unfortunately don't have too much time to study extra stuff just because of my job and how busy I am right now. But backstory stuff, that's really fun. I'd honestly rather be thinking about that outside of the game. So, that's like a rogue, a ranger. I don't even know what an artificer is. Um, or like a
Artificers, I would say, are kind of one of the hardest classes to play. They have everything. They do everything, and they can change everything at any time. Rangers are a good dip into spell casting because they're like, oh, 1/3 caster. They're like less than a half caster, I feel like. Um, but like rogues are really powerful. Hit, strike, get away. You have a very few key abilities that are important to know how to use because a lot of their abilities keep them from taking damage. Like a fighter, they dominate combat, and certain classes of fighters have something similar to spells, but they're not spells, like the battle maneuvers. And that's a great choice that's not a barbarian that allows you to manipulate things. But even if you and Kate are both barbarians, you're not necessarily going to be stepping on each other's toes. Having two fighting characters can be important.
If it helps at all, I was actually planning on being a ranger as one of my characters anyway.
Yeah, the ranger is one of those things. I think rangers are pretty cool. They've got a lot of great things that they can do, and they have just enough magic that they can manipulate the world around them. Um, But like if you're just thinking about an archer, you can make a fighter who's a really powerful archer. You can.
Okay. And can you briefly speak on a paladin? I know that like super well from Dark Souls games, so I kind of know what their vibe is, but I'd love to hear it in the D&D sense in your experience.
Yeah, so like paladins are, again, they're essentially a half caster, so they do have spell slots that they will eventually get a hold of. They have a little bit more limited spell choices than a lot of characters, and they're one of those groups. Damn, I hope I'm. Yeah, I think I'm right when I say they're one of the ones who can choose after a long rest to pick all of their spell slots afresh. But to me, when I play a paladin, my spells don't matter nearly as much as when I roll a crit, you're dropping a smite into that creature. Paladins front load damage. They are holy warriors. They almost always have to have some semblance of a god that they are following. And they have, like clerics, they have to maintain their godly nature to keep their powers. Whether that's an evil god, a good god, or this god or that god, there's a lot of different ways things go, but those are two of the divine casters. But paladins are basically very similar, high AC, high hit points, like a fighter. But part of what they do is their divine smite when they um, pick up a critical attack drops tons of damage. With that in mind, they also will build up to some of their auras. They are one of those creatures that is basically divinely protected by their god, so they don't get sick in ways that other characters can. They eventually can cure a lot of things that other people can be, like illnesses that other people. Paladins are fighting jack of all trades. They have a little bit of healing ability. They have a little bit of casting ability, but they are very much like a front of the line battle warrior.
Okay, thank you. I'm kind of trying to guess between fighter and paladin. I think those are can finalize on that. Whatever rounds out the group the best.
Yeah, I think also like just thinking thematically too of like a gothic horror, right? Like playing someone like a priest or that has like that really like strong connection to like a god, serves as like a good story element too in a place where, it's overrun by like a vampire, um, basically overlord basically, and there's all these bad things happening within the town that, you bring a little bit of hope to the scene and the setting.
Yeah, if we go forward with Curse of Strahd, having holy warriors in the group is a very important aspect of this thing. I've got a group right now that's running through it, and they're all just very like blase, like adventurers, and it's kind of funny because none of them have that conviction to actually do anything about it because none of them are actually holy warriors. They're all doing good deeds, but they don't have an actual call to why they're here.
Okay, I can do a paladin. I might have to think a little creatively, but I can get there and I can keep developing the character over the next, like you said, to level 5. Like I think I can stick it as a paladin and I'll figure out the backstory.
So as you look into that, like eventually you'll kind of see some of the options where you'll have to have like a god in mind or less of a god in mind. That's one of the things to kind of try to think of. Um, if you start off just at like generic deities, as far as Curse of Strahd goes, there is no reason for you all to be from any particular world. So there's a lot of room for you all to be from different areas of the multiverse, which would include people from actually our Earth, just as much as like most of my campaigns take place in Faerun. So if you decide to start looking around at what gods they might serve, I would say like try to get an idea of where you imagine the character, and then we can chat about gods that might fit that. So you're not like bending your character to a god. Instead, you can create the character and then have a god that allows you to fit into that. And then your god will basically be something that almost has to reconfirm yourself that you've made the right choices in the past. And that'll kind of be on some level like the arc of the Paladin is in this world making sure to stay true to your faith. And there are some paladins that don't have to be nearly as god centric, but again, paladins and clerics are two of the classes that kind of have to find that realm.
Yeah, I'll keep researching about the Curse of Strahd, but that'll help me find like a contrary, almost like someone's going to this place because of this holy calling or fight or cleanse or whatever it may be.
As far as stats go, a paladin needs to choose like basically strength or dexterity weapons. Often strength is kind of like the fallback, and then charisma is your casting. And then con is good for everybody. So those are kind of your big three. Is do you want to be a more powerful magic user than you are a weapon user? Um, Sounds like probably not. So I would say kind of pick. Do you want to be like a quick and like precise weapon user, or do you want to be like a big beastie weapon user? Big and beastie will be strength. Quick and precise will be dexterity based. And then
Yeah, luckily Dark Souls has taught me. I haven't played any D&D, but Dark Souls has taught me that stuff with the stats because it kind of takes from D&D. So I'll go dexterity this time. So I kind of know. I might not know D&D, but I kind of know the vibes that some of those things are talking about.
gotcha. So yeah, you'll probably want to go dexterity as your highest, con as your second, and then charisma as your third. But you can kind of switch the con and charisma when it's a 16 and a 14. You can probably make that work pretty much regardless.
Is the con the more of the spell casting, like the secondary spell casting that you're referring to?
Your charisma will be your spell casting.
Okay, thank you.
But it's also like your conviction to like talk to people. Paladins are still one of those, like they can be the face. Sorry, I can't even say that with a straight face. They can be the face of the party, in that they can talk and persuade and threaten people really well. Um, Caitlin, when you were talking about creativity, what kind of thoughts did you have creativity wise, or was it already like that barbarian idea?
Yeah, it was sort of just that barbarian idea, and then just wanted to see what everybody else had in mind, see if could bounce ideas off for that. Or and then also like your advice as like a brand new player, like what you would recommend.
There's a lot of realms for where you might go with barbarians. They will tend to be one of those characters who's just a little bit more forward about the solution to things is killing it. There's certainly realms for other ways of treating it, but that's kind of how a lot of barbarians will, like, as an archetype, kind of play out. As far as their subclasses go, there's a certain level of some of them are more like animal based, like the totem barbarian is one of the strongest in that everything that ever hits them while they're raging, they're going to take less damage from. They start to gain some really cool abilities from the animals that they kind of like bring into their nature. Um, but there's a lot of different ways to kind of play the barbarians depending on like what you would like to focus on. But like some of them are like almost like the storm incarnate. You've got like the ability of like having your spirits of your past kind of summon with you. There's a lot of ways to play a barbarian. Their subclasses wise, but in general, a barbarian will often be just that brute of throw me at them. Is that kind of what you were thinking of playing?
Yeah, yeah, pretty much. I was sort of looking for like outside um character characters that I like that I would like emulate. Um so I think for the barbarian idea I had in mind who was it? Dax from Guardians of the Galaxy, and then I had another
That's a
character in
perfect
mind.
barbarian.
Okay, cool. That's that's what I was thinking. So
Yeah, his way of like how matter of fact, his oh, you can't, no, nothing can go over my head, I can jump too high or whatever. Like his way of responding to stuff like that, that's very barbarian to me, where it's like you say, oh, we need to stop him, so he like hops off the ship and he's about to face an army alone. That is a barbarian to a T. Where I've had games where people have to put the barbarian on a leash because they understand that if they forget to watch over the barbarian, shit's gonna go down, and it's gonna go down like that. So yeah, Dax is definitely a good barbarian to channel.
cool, cool. Okay.
So, um, I feel like what was it, Jim? If Rodney is potentially a ranger, which we're still kind of open on that, you potentially have a paladin, you potentially have a barbarian. What kind of thoughts do you have going on, Jim?
I don't know how important it is to have like a completely caster, like a full caster, a magic centric person. I'm happy to do that. I really did not come into this session with any thoughts in mind whatsoever. Like it's a blank slate as far as backstory or character type. I did think that either a disgraced former court wizard or like somehow wrangling like an old greasy like riverboat captain. I don't know what class that would line up with, but those are the two ideas that came to mind while we've been talking. So
Swashbuckling, yeah, okay. Swashbuckling rogue is a really good like river captain. Kind of that like there.
less swashbuckling, more like has lived several lifetimes.
Old
So
and
I was
mysterious
almost thinking
knowledge.
of like the captain from Jaws, like
I
just a
got you.
scruffy, greasy, like cynical bastard.
That's exactly what I was picturing.
Yeah, so I mean, I feel like that's an archetype you can almost fit into any different character class. You could do that really well with a wizard for sure. As far as things go, uh, were you happy with the idea, Rodney, of if you went ranger? Are you feeling that right now?
Yeah, I'm solid with that.
Does anybody know? What is it? Tony and I feel like I'm missing one name still.
Theo. Theo probably wants to be a
Yeah, Theo.
bard. Theo probably wants to be a bard overall, and kind of wanted to call that. But they're a really experienced D&D player too, so they'll be able to jump right in. They wanted a bard for this class.
Yeah, so I mean, as far as things go, I feel like my bad. Did I interrupt you, Tony or Rodney, when I asked you were you feeling the ranger still?
No, no, you're fine. You did not interrupt me at all.
Is that where you're still at, kind of thinking like you're going to go forward with a ranger?
Yeah, I mean, I have the character pretty much conceptualized.
So, I mean, right now, if you all have a paladin, a ranger, and a bard, you have healing, you have a holy warrior. It would be great if Tony felt like playing a cleric. You guys would be really strong with 4 different healing classes in the group. Um, and it gives you 2 holy warriors. So like that's a pretty super well-rounded group, and it 100% points Jim towards battlefield control. Whether you go like rangers have really powerful battlefield control as well, but like whether you go for something like a sorcerer who's like big damage nukes, or if you go for something like a wizard who might have less damage output but more control over the battlefield, those are the type of things that really work out well. And yeah, I feel like at this point, Jim, you're almost at that point like you should be the caster for the group. And the only variable will really be coming down to what Tony would like to play. But right now you guys have a lot of those characters who will mesh well together, and theoretically, depending on who misses any given session, you would still have like 3 people who can heal, or you would still have like 2 people who are like somewhat battlefield control. Bards, it's hard to tell what Theo might go for, but bards are one of those characters that they can do pretty much everything. They don't necessarily excel at anything better than like the straight up class that's meant to do it, but that doesn't mean that they don't do it nearly just as well. And a lot of that comes down to how he chooses to make the bard, where he chooses to focus it, because bards can do stuff pretty much like anybody else.
Do you have any recommendations as far as casters? I don't know if I've ever played a sorcerer. I think I DM'd one in a one shot. Because I saw my friend playing one and it seemed fun with all the magic missiles and whatnot. And
So
I think I've played a druid before too.
yeah, like I've pretty much only ever played casters. They're kind of my bag. As far as things go, like yeah, druid would work out well as well. Like not to discount them. They're a very powerful battlefield control as well as just everything that druids do. Um, but that's kind of a look at like where you might want to focus yourself. If you're kind of like that wise and well-lived person, um, that almost archetype wise to me like screams like wizard or a druid. Um, Although there's no reason that a sorcerer couldn't have that same thing. But like sorcerers are a little bit more natural in their magic is a part of them. Wizards are very learned in how they do things. So like a sorcerer will almost always have a lot less spell choices, but they can often cast more of them, and they kind of cycle their sorcery points through themselves. So a sorcerer can often, if you use everything in a battle, you can often start to siphon your sorcery points to create new spell slots and be a little bit more prepared for the day to continue on. Um, Whereas like a wizard can rest and gain like a little bit of their low stuff back, but not necessarily like a whole lot. But a sorcerer, I think at level 20, a sorcerer has like 13 different spells. Whereas a wizard, if they gain enough time, they can get every single spell. Pretty much, there's like 6 spells in the game that are limited to paladins that like a wizard can never touch. That's like one of those big things there. Like a wizard over time can pick up pretty much any spell. Druids are very heavy in like concentrating on spells. You will see like a third of druid spells require concentration. So a lot of druid spells will compete with themselves. Druids can pick all of their spells from all of the druid spell list every single time they take a long rest. A wizard can pick all of their spells from all of the spells that they know every single time they long rest. And a sorcerer has what they know at their fingertips at all times.
I was almost thinking I could combine my two like background ideas, in that it's the person became a riverboat captain as like their second life after uh, running away from a to be determined fall from grace as like a court wizard. Um, as far as like mechanics go, uh, I feel like this would be a good opportunity to learn more of how magic works and like learn more of the spells. But I kind of like the idea, like character wise, of them being more of a natural magic user. So I might go as sorcerer just to keep that like spell management to more of a minimum.
Yeah, so that's kind of that level of your choices are a little bit more important with the sorcerer. If you ever feel like you made like big mistakes, we can let you fix it. Like I don't want the character to be garbage just because you feel like you made mistakes. But on some level, like sorcerers, basically every time you level, you can swap out a spell that you knew and don't think you'll use in the future, and then you get a new spell as well as you gain a new spell. So every level you can get rid of one and you can learn two, basically. Um, if you don't want to get rid of a spell, you would just learn one. That's how a sorcerer would normally improve over time. And that's part of why it can be important with a sorcerer traditionally to make sure not to choose something that you don't really know how it's going to work. But if you want to go forward with the sorcerer, just let me know if you feel like you made a mistake and you like really need to swap something out and it makes you want to like not play the character. So we can correct it instead of like garbage the character.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
And then like I mean a sorcerer falling from grace as a court wizard is a perfect type of thing where the sorcerer was using magic that they had innately. Um, but they were being called upon to do things that wizards often do, which is essentially just like do this. And they're like handed a spell book and he like can't do it. So that's like one of those ways that you can easily tie that into that same idea where your fall from grace was people basically thinking like, is he a charlatan? What's been going on this whole time? He can't actually cast a spell. Wizards cast these spells all the time. That's so basic.
Yeah, I just thought I thought of that and was thinking like the whole, shady, shifty grifter like talking themselves into a job interview into a job they're not really qualified for, and then it goes horribly wrong. And yeah, that possibly charlatan angle fit well with the you know sleazy riverboat captain archetype too, I thought.
All right. I assume everybody has at least the start of their characters created. I don't see anybody in the actual game yet, so I just popped that link back in there. If you click on that link, it should ask you to join the game with that character. One of the reasons to be in the game is to make sure I have content already purchased, and I want to make sure that you all have access to it. In case going forward with creating the character that you want to use something you don't have access to right now.
Just curious, Mara, does that include like the Curse of Strahd book that will have like more details about like Barovia and stuff?
No, like a lot of the content I try not to buy multiple times because it's one of the things that's frustrating about switching over. Um, I generally have things purchased for the creation of characters, not necessarily for like the background information. What were you looking for from Curse of Strahd? Like, what are you thinking?
Mainly, I was just kind of curious just to read over like the source material and stuff like that from the book. But if you don't have it, that's fine.
I mean, I have the book and then I have PDFs of the book. Um, what I mean is like actually reading on D&D Beyond, it's really easy to just fall into spoilers. So one of the things that I would say about Curse of Strahd is I'm not necessarily opposed to you all as players knowing and understanding what you are about to get into. But as far as you as characters go, I would say try to create yourselves and imagine yourselves still inside of just a normal world. If you want to come from Faerun, that's my preferable way to start this out. Is you all actually being sent on an adventure out of Daggerford, which is just south of Waterdeep on the Sword Coast, and that's just kind of a classic Dungeons and Dragons setting. Um, and basically, you will just be wandering like to accomplish this quest when you are brought to Barovia, and you will end up inside of Curse of Strahd. So, in general, part of what I like about Curse of Strahd is that any given time you bring a character in, ignorance just plays into the setting. Because once we get to it, effectively, there's going to be a point where you lose track of where you were. An unknown amount of time is going to pass while you're wandering around in a mist that you can't see through. And then all of a sudden, you're going to start to walk out of the mist and you're in a different world. Um, and that's part of how like Curse of Strahd really plays out as a really awesome place to be. So starting it with a character who has like a lot of back knowledge to it isn't necessarily um like the most ideal thing. You don't necessarily have to avoid it, especially once you guys are like in campaign. You can create characters who are from there. But on some level, I usually like to start Curse of Strahd from somewhere else. So you have a reason to, that's like your first call, is to try to like get out of where you are. But I'll see if there's like pages. I don't really know if I've ever noticed if Curse of Strahd was set up with stuff that's meant for players to kind of give you a feel for things. I feel like that's a little bit more like Van Richten's, where they give a little bit more about it. Oh yeah, there are particular backgrounds though.
Okay, that works. Yeah, my thing was kind of just more of just get like a general setting, but I guess you'll probably end up doing a lot of that when we kind of start our first session.
Yeah, so that's the thing, is once you guys have characters, that's part of why I don't want to rush through character creation and force people to create them, when I'd much rather have like Brendan and Kate like take their time creating their characters and then try to sit down with them privately to try to work through any questions that they might end up having. And that's part of why I usually say session zero is like, don't count too much on actually playing. If everybody's experienced, a lot of that can just be thrown to the wayside and we can play. Um, but I'd rather just like have this week for them to do that. And then next week, yeah, we'll basically start with preparing all of that. And I'll basically be just like, a lot of that session ends up being a lot of that like description, as you're, again, it's basically that quick little walkthrough where you're going to be doing something, time is going to become mysterious to you, and all of a sudden you're going to wake up in the mist.
Okay, that sounds good. One thing really quickly, what were the numbers again that we rolled for our skill stats?
17, 16, 14, 14, 13, 9.
Does that mean I have to take the 9, or we can kind of give that to anyone?
No, no, no. All of you are using those 6 numbers.
Okay, and that's going to round out our entire character of those numbers.
Yeah, so that was Brendan speaking.
Yeah, so I'm Brendan speaking. So basically, 9 is going to be our worst stat that we have.
Exactly. Yeah, so like you're basically going to choose something like 17 is your dex, 16 is your constitution, and 14 is your charisma. And then you'll get to choose with the lower 3 numbers. Like maybe maybe you're smarter and a little bit wiser and do 14 wisdom, 13 intelligence, and 9 strength. But basically, almost everybody has 3 main stats and then 3 stats that are just kind of eh. So I just dropped the link to the backgrounds. I guess I probably should have checked that I printed it correctly. But those are backgrounds that are a little bit more Curse of Strahd centric. I would say, again, those are probably more useful once you guys are in setting. If you have a character death that you want to bring a character back from. Um, but in general, like I like having your characters come from somewhere else. So there's a very basic like pull just to find your way out of this place. Because that I think is a part of the tension of it, is that you continually find more and more of a sense of, is this a dream? Are we trapped here? Are we dead? And you don't know the answer to it.
Okay, so I have some really good like overall thoughts on character backstory. What should I be working towards right now? Because we've talked about a dexterity character, a paladin. I've kind of found a cool god on the D&D god list. Um, what should I be focusing on next?
One thing I would mention is depending on like I guess the class that you're going with, if you look at like the player's handbook, which I think should be shared within the content within the campaign. This is on D&D Beyond. Or you can even kind of just Google it. They'll usually give you like a general idea of like, if you're going to play this class, it's best to set like wisdom or dexterity, whatever it might be, as like your highest points, and then kind of spread the rest around.
So paladin wise, part of what you'll look for after that is on some level you'll want to like look at your subclass as well, and start to prepare for that, because that'll be a big choice that starts to focus you. So like when I said you don't necessarily have to be a godly paladin, among that will come to the idea that, like the Oathbreaker is a paladin class that doesn't follow a god. So your subclasses are going to be one of the big choices to kind of prepare for. Um, but yeah, like having a sense of just that like initial page that should link you straight to the PHB with the Paladin, on D&D Beyond. Like having a sense of like where a Paladin kind of starts there will give you some sense of how things will play out with them. And that one's the Barbarian for Kate. But those give you like the first idea of where you might have your next choices. I feel like Paladins make their choice at level 3, and I think Barbarians are the same thing. And then when you choose weapons for your paladin, as a dexterity based paladin, when you go to, again, we can do this together too, but when you go to select your starting equipment, you'll want to make sure that you select stuff with finesse in their abilities, because finesse is what allows you to use your dexterity instead of strength.
Okay, and is there somewhere I can like look through those starting weapons till I can get an idea? Because I'm looking through the subclasses at the moment.
That one should link you to it on the D&D Beyond there. But yeah, it's essentially like the chapter I feel like right after all of that, maybe a little bit later, where you start to deal with your equipment. You'll have choices about armor. So in general, like a barbarian will not wear armor. They basically go around, and as long as you are unarmored, you are able to add your constitution to your armor score. Whereas a paladin can normally wear heavy armor, but heavy armor is not affected by your dexterity and requires higher strength. Whereas, like a medium armor can gain a little bit of your dexterity as a bonus, or light armor can gain all of it. So on some level, you'll have a bit of a choice to make there. Once you max out your dexterity with studded leather armor, you're straight up one less armor than the strongest um, armor from like the heavy armor choices. And part of where that is still a bonus is you also would then have a +5 to your initiative, which makes you more likely to be able to kill something before it can attack you. And the best way to stay healthy, the best way to heal your friends is to kill something and prevent it from being able to attack. You can almost never out heal damage in this game. So having high AC is like a good way to prevent getting hit. But going before something and actually killing it is far better than not getting hit, and it's far better than healing somebody after they get hit. So, as the four of you start to actually flesh out who your characters are, I'm gonna throw it out there that again, the one of the people from Daggerford is going to call on your group to kind of come together. You all are welcome to kind of chat together and try to connect your characters together. You're welcome to come together as just a group of 6 different adventurers. But basically, what I am going to start off things with is you are being called before Lady Anteos. She runs the Sword Coast Adventurers Bank. Oh, wait, I said that wrong. The Sword Coast. Damn, I'm forgetting one of the words just offhand. But Sword Coast Bank basically is a bank that operates along the Sword Coast, and she runs the Daggerford version of it. She is going to call you all forward. So, on some level, your first kind of backstory thing is to have an adventurer who is answering this call to Lady Antheos. And she's basically calling for adventurers who can assist trying to find her daughter. And that's kind of where we're going to start the next session. So, as you look to plan your characters, on some level, you can be coming from Waterdeep, which is about like a 2 days travel away from Daggerford. You can be in Daggerford already. You could be coming from a longer travel from the south, whether it be Baldur's Gate or um, Dragon Keep. Pulling off the top of my head, I can't think of it as well, but those are kind of like roughly where you're going to start with your level 1 characters, is answering this call to Lady Anteos. So as everybody kind of like thinks about, like you've got a lot of room for background wise when you select those to have little bits that kind of add to your character. When you select those, they often give you, I think it's like 2 flaws, a bond, and then there's one other choice. And you can like randomize those, you can select those, or you can even write in other stuff if you have these other things. But those are kind of the things that start to form your character. And I like to consider it as like every time you play your character, you meet them again. So you're going to learn a lot about your character over time. Yeah, I've got a similar one linked inside of the resources up top, the D&D resources for all of Faerun.
Do you have any tips on picking the background?
Yeah, that's kind of what I was getting at there, where there's a certain level of you can kind of make your background conform with who you are. Who is that asking? I'm sorry, I'm still trying to.
Jim.
Gotcha. So if you're looking at that idea of being like almost fallen from grace, like court wizard, you could easily have like charlatan as your background, as you were basically faking being a court wizard for as long as possible. You could have like the sea captain be part of your background. There's a lot of different ways you can interpret those backgrounds. And there's plenty of ways too that it might be a little overly complicated, but you can also create a background to make those things fit. But in general, I try to often say like the background is just like a little starter. They often give you a little ability but it doesn't necessarily mean you're ever really going to use that ability. Um, it really is just kind of like a very like primer type of starting point. But there's a lot of different backgrounds just kind of open to interpret how you might be looking at your character. So like those Curse of Strahd ones that I dropped in the channel there, those are some of the options that can do things. If you want to be an orphan, that's basically one of the backgrounds where you're like a street rat, basically. There's a lot of room for interpreting where your background is. Um, a ranger, it's often like the troped to be like the outlander. You can be like the sage who kind of lives off by themselves. There's a lot of room to interpret a lot of those backgrounds to fit almost any character. And then once you kind of like work with some of that stuff, you are welcome to be very creative in your backgrounds. The more you want your background to come up in game, I would suggest actually playing it out. Obviously, it's going to be a little bit different, like when you are essentially about to get pulled into Barovia, which is a different land from your home. But just generically, like when people are playing for their background, I try to suggest, like, if you are looking for your sister and you walk into a tavern, like narrate that as Mara walks into the tavern, I'm just gonna pause at the entrance and try to subtly glance around and just to see, do I see anyone with long brown hair and those blue eyes? Like, just looking to see my sister. She's somewhere. Do I see her here? And like every time I walk into a tavern, I do that. That's like that reminder. Like, yep, I'm looking for my sister. She's lost somewhere on the Sword Coast.
Just curious, Mara, with kind of like sharing our character information with you, I'm sure there's like some things that we'd probably like to keep to ourselves in terms of like character development and stuff like that. But I guess like what would you prefer, I guess, or what would you like to get back from us, kind of once we've fleshed out our characters?
I mean, in general, I would say I want you to give me everything that you've got. I don't necessarily want you to write like a small book about your character, but like somewhere between a few lines and a few paragraphs, I think is the ideal creation of your background. Um, I definitely think if you want stuff to happen, you have to plan it with me. So I am not your adversary to like hide stuff from. Um, but like, yeah, it kind of depends. If you guys are looking for really rich backstories, there's a lot that you can do, and you still have to work with me to make it actually kind of come alive in the game. One thing that I often try to remind people is as you get closer to finishing your character, we almost have to spitball between each other a little bit more to share an idea. Like you share an idea with me, I can tell you how that might interact with the world around you, and then you can kind of interpret that and see how like your next iteration of it works out. And it's almost that like back and forth. And that's one of those things where everything about D&D is shared storytelling. When we are creating your character, we kind of do a shared creation. You create the character. I'll try to tell you about a little bit more about the world. You get a little bit closer to like having a solid creation of your character, and we'll get closer to where it like fits well with the world. And it's the same way as like once you are playing the game, you all I absolutely love when people create their backstory with their fellow players. So the less that you create ahead of time, the more you are capable of, like, if you think you have a sibling that is missing, you might have a conversation in a tavern with somebody else, and you're like, You have a sibling who's missing? My sister's been missing for 15 years. They went missing in the same area? What if the same cult has taken them all? And all of a sudden that becomes something that you're actually like working together and it's like a background together. There's just a lot of ways I feel like hiding stuff as the people who are playing this game almost never should happen. Hiding stuff between the actual characters is a lot more open to happen, but there's on some level like you shouldn't be hiding stuff from me, even if you guys are planning like the final assault on Strahd. There's a certain level of I'm not like sitting back listening to you to stop you from doing it. I'm sitting back listening to you guys to try to figure out how that's going to work, both succeed as well as how it will fail. It's not that like, oh, they're going to do this. Well, I'm going to put a door in front of that they can't open, and ha ha ha, I foiled them. That's where like we really have to share as much as possible.
Okay, that sounds good. One kind of idea I just kind of have off the top of my head is I already started like a Google Drive, just with some of the documents that you've already shared, like the Curse of Strahd backgrounds and the character creation brew doc, just so it's easy and to be able to check and everything like that. I was thinking about actually creating like a maybe like a character sheet right there where we can share our backgrounds, and so that way it's visible to everybody. And in addition to you, Mara, so that we actually have kind of like somewhere we can go to discuss that dialogue and expand upon our characters in the future.
Once you have your characters linked to the D&D Beyond campaign, you can actually view other players' characters. And when you go to view your character, if you guys put your background stuff under background, actually, wait, under extras, you have like action, inventory, features, description, and then notes. There's a certain amount of like background stuff you can put under the description, but under notes, there's a much more space for backgrounds. In general, that's where I want you to put your background stuff. If you want to write more stuff, there's certainly like realms for that to happen. I'm not sure where it becomes more ideal versus less ideal, but everybody should have access to look at each other's characters through D&D Beyond. As far as things go, like particular things that I've uploaded, I will probably just like sticky in this channel, and then that's what I actually use my Google Drive for as well, is for pertinent information like that. Like, if you look at that D&D resources channel, I have a link to a Faerun map like that one, for that same idea. It's just very useful to have like a continent-wide Faerun look.
Got ya.
So not like a this or that. I don't think there's any reason like not to use the one that you created, but I try to do that for you all as well. In particular, when I clicked on the one that you linked before, I just was locked out of it. I'm not sure if you just have to change a setting for that.
That was for the map.
Oh no, maybe I clicked on it too quick, and it wasn't set up properly. But like when you first posted the character creation thing, it gave me an error.
Probably because the permissions. I had to change the permissions.
Yeah, so I actually think you might have a little more current map of Faerun than myself.
Yeah, I was looking for. Actually, no. I kind of just Googled it.
It's hard
And
to
yeah,
figure
I
out
just
what
Googled it.
generation. It's hard to figure out what generation any given one is, because this might actually be older because it still lists Netheril. Yeah, I feel like that's actually might be like the 1300s or the 1200s. Faerun in 5th edition is essentially 1492.
Okay, so should I really be digging deep into D&D Beyond? Because I've got some great mental notes, and I just don't want them all to be like kind of lost. So I'm just trying to get them like down on paper, so to speak. But paper would be going through the D&D Beyond character creator, correct?
I don't know if I necessarily understand what you mean. I don't think you can hurt yourself going through D&D Beyond. I think keeping notes on paper is probably a great start, but as you get a little bit closer to solidifying things, that's where maybe put them into your notes, like on your character sheet.
Okay, I'll just stick to a Google Doc right now because I'm just so I can keep writing things down because I pretty much got most things solidified. I'm just still a little mystified on how I'm actually going to like assign my stats and subclass and stuff like that.
Yeah, so again, you can contact me at any given point, and we can talk more about the stats. But on some level, if you're going for dexterity based, you're gonna do like that 17 will go to your dexterity. You'll do 16 into either your con or your charisma, because that's your spell casting ability. Those are the two next most important, and then the 14 will be to whichever other one. And then the other three, it's very open to you to how you interpret your character. Yeah, so that map that I just posted, that's the most current map of Faerun that I've ever found. And that is still, I think that is, oh wait, that's a small one too. That's not as big as I could have posted. I know I have one that actually has all of Chalt on it too. Um, you'll see like in like the top left, like in the northwest there, there's a big desert, and that's where Netheril has basically been destroyed. Um, and that was a few hundred years ago in the past. So, and then I feel like there was like another world that collapsed into this world, that filled up that gigantic crater that is in like the southeast side of the map that Rodney posted.
I actually took it down.
Oh yeah, you're good. It's one of the funny things about like searching for these maps is I feel like Wizards of the Coast has been more hesitant to make those maps, because of how much they change those maps.
Yeah, it's interesting because the character that I actually want to use is from Zakara, and I guess they haven't used like that part of like the realm since like D&D 2 or 3.
Yeah, I started in 3.5. You said Sakar?
Yeah, that's right, Zakara.
Yeah, that like rings a bell, but it's not even terribly familiar to me.
Yeah,
Um,
it's even further south than I think it's Kalsham.
okay, I got you. Still in Forgotten Realms. See, I like never read any of his books either, so I'm not even terribly familiar with Forgotten Realms. It's just really useful because there's so much information from it.
Yeah, I've been kind of just going off of Wiki for everything for kind of the conceptualization of my character. Um, but yeah,
That's huge about it too, because like when you go to search gods, like the wikis out there, there's so much good information to just make really simple solutions. It's not
yeah,
the desert realm, is it though?
yeah, it is a desert realm actually.
So I downloaded so much stuff for probably that area, and I feel like it was from Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. And I just lost my backup hard drive like 2 weeks ago.
Oh
So I
man, that's a
lost a
bummer.
lot of my extra stuff where I was like, okay, I don't want this on my PC because it is a lot of extra files to like search through. But I know this is going to be an interesting setting to run in. And yeah, that sounds like it. Like it's almost like Aladdin.
Yeah, exactly.
That's 100% what I lost recently. Yep.
Yeah, I kind of like the idea of just having this character that's from like a faraway land like that. That kind of I have the idea that he was magically dropped off in Faerun by a genie, and so he's kind of like lost and he's trying to find his way back. So that's kind of like my idea behind it.
So if you want to go forward with that idea, that might even make it something where we'll start more properly inside of Barovia. Like as everybody starts to come forward with their ideas, if we don't have a particular reason to have you in Daggerford, and it could be silly to have you transported across a world to then be transferred into another world. But if we don't have everybody start in Daggerford, it's usually a pretty like, I don't want to say railroad. It is your first fight. It is often a fight that you are outmatched on. And it is meant to be a fight that you do indeed lose that brings you into Barovia. Um, but there's a lot of different ways that we can start it, and instead of like isolating you outside of it, it can be just as interesting to start everybody at that same moment where after X amount of time in the mist starts to clear and you're going to walk out and start to see Earth beneath your feet again for the first time. You're going to see sky in front of your eyes again for the first time. And that might be where it's best for us to start. And just kind of like a narrated fast forward over like some of the group who might have like a more natural connection to the Sword Coast um, can have that idea like where they were still given that quest. Um, or I can like that's all the for what it's worth, that's my own twist on how to change Curse of Strahd. I like to start it as the main character in this campaign is actually somebody you've been searching for from beyond Barovia.
Got ya. I mean, I'm open to either one. I mean, with my character, I was kind of also just keeping open to the fact that, like, it could have been years ago that, he ended up in Faerun. So by this point, you could be a little bit more acclimated, to the environment and have a little bit more notoriety as well. Like I kind of like the idea of there being like someone that we're trying to find because I mean as like a ranger, right? I'd imagine that I might be brought into the party just for my ability to be able to track.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely some great reasons to do that. One thing that I could also bring up is I often think when you start at level one, you don't need all that much backstory to tell why you're a badass. Because really, as a level one, you only have like the mental strength of somebody who wants to be heroic. It's far more of a like difference between brave and courageous. It might not be intelligent that you are so heroic, but you are. And like all that sets you above a commoner is almost that idea that you want to do something to help people, not that you've actually ever done it in the past. And that's one of those things where it's kind of funny. Like the difference between the lowest levels is usually that you've actually just stood up to something instead of actually being like bowing down to any threats.
Got ya. Yeah, I mean I'm totally down for that too. That sounds awesome. I kind of like the idea of, kind of just raising your hand and saying I'll do it.
I think my character setup is pretty much done, like stat wise. If you wanna, and I just joined the D&D Beyond campaign. If you wanna like look that over.
That was Jim.
Yep.
Oh, that actually reminds me. There was one more thing I wanted to talk about. Um, yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I'm gonna spend more time looking over stuff like between now and then, but that looks pretty good. Like as a solid start right away. Looks like just looking at your hit points that you probably chose Draconic as your background.
I actually didn't, at least for me, I didn't see any other option.
That's where joining my campaign before you actually went through to create it is a clutch thing. Draconic is probably the only one in the SRD that you had the choice of.
Will they not be available if I go to edit?
Well, it's just a different thing. Like, it might be worth creating another character instead of editing the character. That's more of a question about your familiarity with the creation process than necessarily that it's easy to go back and edit. But if you went into edit right now, and I think it's the second tab, maybe it's the third tab, is your class. You'll see a few different class options for the sorcerer. Effectively, the Draconic is super powerful. But there's also like the Wild Magic. Those are the two PHB. There's the Shadow Sorcerer from Xanathar's.
Yeah, I have no
Not
problem
Braves.
with the Draconic in terms of like gameplay. I just have zero interest in like role playing that at all.
Like role playing the actual dragon part of it.
Yeah, I mean, it would basically be just there in the background as a stat. Like, I would never talk about it or reference it because I just don't. I picked it because it was the only option.
Yeah, I mean, I would invite you to still look at the other sorcerers then, because there's a certain level of like the dragon things manifest physically on you. Like you effectively will have dragon scales. There's a certain level of you can already breathe dragon fire. So there's a certain level of like the draconic stuff happens right away. If you guys were to take this high enough, you will eventually sprout wings. So there's
Yeah,
this,
I'm definitely switching then.
yeah, there's a certain level of like you can't avoid being evidently a dragon at some point.
Okay, this is Brendan. Quick question. I'm in the D&D Beyond and looking through the stats and kind of assigning them. Can you just explain? I'm very familiar with strength and dexterity and their vibes and what's different about that, but intelligence, wisdom, charisma, and constitution, what kind of those roles play? Or you could give me some help on how could guide my character with the remaining couple stats.
So pretty generically, like the mental stats are intelligence is your ability to remember stuff. Wisdom is your ability to say the right thing at the right time, and charisma is your ability to charm people, or to be charming, to be interesting, and basically not be like a very sandpaper, standoffish person. Um, so like you've got your physical stats; those are very simple to choose. Um, your charisma is your spell casting stat, so that will be an important one as a paladin. Um, Intelligence won't necessarily be all that important. A lot of holy warriors tend to be more wise than they are necessarily intelligent. And a lot of that at that point, it just comes down to stats that you choose to do. You can see in your character sheet when you go to look at it like from the kind of finished perspective that if you want to like look over some clues that are before you, you're going to end up either doing an investigation check that is like your intelligence, your ability to like look over stuff real quickly and make a decision about what you might be seeing, or you can do a perception check, which is a wisdom thing, and it's your ability to discern the difference of what you're seeing. So it's very similar thing, and it's just a slightly different mental stat for a pretty similar result.
Okay, and can you define constitution for me? What is that standing for?
Constitution is essentially mechanically your ability to have hit points and your ability to maintain concentration while you're getting beat up. Hit points inside of the game are far more your mental will to stay fighting despite having taken injuries that would kill a normal person. Um, so at some point, you're going to see our half orc barbarian is going to be Debe. I can't help but say it like that, but Debbie. Um, and at some point, I'm sure they're going to get an axe to their body, and their constitution is them continuing to fight despite having a massive wound that would kill a normal person. But
Okay. And then so I have, I'm kind of selected everything. Well, we're looking at the stats. I'm looking at the numbers available to us. So if I was going to sacrifice on strength or intelligence, I already have an amazing dexterity. Is it totally fine to just kind of like softball strength with a 9 because I have the good dexterity to fight with?
dump stats are always a choice that you have to make. Strength doesn't necessarily do a lot for a lot of things in the game. It's your ability to carry things. It's your ability to wear heavy armor. And it's your ability sometimes to break out of things that are restraining you against your will. So if you dump strength, the cost is there might be some point where you are trying to fight against something that you cannot use your acrobatics to break free of a grapple because of the way it's restraining you. That's a very minor point of it. But what that is you basically have to choose, like, do you want to be less wise or less intelligent so you can break out of something that might try to restrain you? Or do you want to make sure to have higher mental strength, mental stats? A lot of those just kind of, I would always say, try to take some time to figure out who your character is. Are they fast and have like lean muscle mass? Or are they still big and strong? Because 14 strength is still somebody who is big and strong.
Yeah, I'm thinking more of the wise, fast, quick, and witty character rather than like a ultra strong one. So I'm like willing to make a sacrifice there to play more of the intelligent character. So I have 14 at wisdom right now, but I'm like just deciding between my 13 and my 9. So I was thinking about dumping strength at this point and having, good
Yeah, I think
intelligence
that's.
most of.
I think you already have that solution ahead of you. Yep, 13 intelligence and do 9 in strength.
Okay. Just trying to make sure I wasn't like sentencing myself to death by picking like the worst strength score. That's all.
No, you guys don't have big choices to make like that. In the long run, a lot of characters will have, like point by. I almost always will end up with a character who has 2 15s, 2 8s, and 2 like mediocre skills. Um, you will quite often find that 9, wherever any of you put that 9, that is a great place to have hilarious things happen. One of the fun and amazing things about D&D is you will often remember successes, but you will definitely laugh and joke and remember big failures. And having a dump stat is a great time to have hilarious things happen like that. It might suck in the moment, but those are often the things that you're going to remember over time.
Just curious, Mara, when selecting like a language, when if you wanted to speak to like the undead or like ghosts or anything like that, like things that could be a little bit more demonic, like what kind of language would you be looking for?
Um, so one thing I'm curious about how open you all are is to homebrew. Is actually language related, but in general, like to just simply answer your question right off the bat, is often dead things and undead things don't have a particular language. They often have the language they spoke when they were alive. So that often means that this creature understands and maybe cannot speak, or understands and speaks the language they knew when they were alive. Um, so there's not a simple solution to that question. In the player's handbook, around the background sections, I feel like in chapter 4, you can see a list of languages and you can see a list of root languages. So there's a certain level of choosing stuff like that. But a homebrew that I've been interested in actually putting in place is telling you not to fill out your languages. While we are playing through the game, if I tell you somebody is speaking a language and you want to be the person who can understand it, you then tell me that you speak that language. And I'll tell you they're speaking Sylvan, and you can go into your character and, you can speak Common and 3 other languages because you're a ranger. You'll just fill in one of those 3, and Sylvan will be locked in for you. And eventually, as you create your characters, you guys will answer all of those. But like starting off the bat, any of those that are kind of a wild card, I like the idea of letting it be up to you inside of the campaign to say, I would like to be the one who can speak to that one. Because otherwise it really is the crapshoot. It's like, I'd like to speak Primordial, Sylvan, Common, and I'm a dwarf, so I have to speak Dwarvish.
Yeah, I'm glad that you said that because I mean that's kind of like what I was thinking too. I didn't really want to end up with all these useless languages.
Yeah, and that's part of the problem with the languages. It's if you have something that you want to speak because it works with your background, great. But I feel like a great homebrew is that actual idea to leave it up to you all in the moment of the campaign to say, I can speak to that thing, and then I'll tell you what language that you speak. And it'll almost be left up to the group, like, before you have all of your languages kind of decided, I'll just kind of like I keep like a sheet of a lot of things that your characters have, so I know stuff offhand. But before those things get all filled out, it'll almost go to the group like this person walks out of the woods. You see that they don't seem to be wearing clothing per se. You can tell that they understand what clothing is, as they have many leaves kind of woven through their themselves, and they have some semblance of animal hides covering their personage. But this person looks like they are a part of nature. And as they step out to you and they start to speak, does anybody understand this language that they are clearly not speaking in common? And that would almost be a call to you to say, um, I like switched off of it, but your ranger's name speaks Sylvan. I'd like to speak to that druid.
All right, so to summarize that language stuff, we should just pick something simple. So I'm thinking of like a human character that kind of communicates with a god of death. There's a really cool god. So let me find it.
So while you're looking for that, I'm trying to say don't select the language.
Okay.
There's a certain level of if you want something to be a part of your story, go for it. But if you want your language to be of high utility, you'll eventually pick during the campaign. But like if you've selected and you're playing a dwarf, your dwarf is going to know Dwarvish and Common. And then if you have a third language choice at some point, you'll be able to like leave that blank and say, I speak primordial. Granted, primordial is more like if you have that reason that you want to be able to speak to gods, that's the type of language that you can speak to like elementals. Um, if you want to speak to devils, you can speak infernal. There's a lot of different languages that if you want it as part of your backstory, go for it. But if you select languages before the campaign, it's really common for people to select all the same languages, and then it's really common for people to select languages that don't actually come up in the campaign.
Okay, do I have to think about these bonds, ideals, personality traits, and stuff like that? Or just more of my backstory?
Those are the things you can roll for and randomly create those. You can look over those and pick the ones that you think fit your character, or you can take some time to write your own that fit your character. But those are kind of the things like rolling randomly is just a solution for people who don't necessarily know what they're creating yet. It's very good for when you randomly generate a character to know who you're looking at. When you like select them, just from the list before you. It gives you a way to know a little bit more about your character based on the background that you selected. But it's both yes and no. I want you to have bonds, ideals, and flaws, but you don't necessarily have to roll them randomly. You don't necessarily have to select from them, and you don't necessarily have to take those in particular, but you need some. Because those are the things that instruct you on who you're role playing. And to me, those things are far more important than, except for with a paladin, locking in the idea of like, well, I'm neutral evil. Those things tell you a lot about how your character interacts with the world, which on some level tells you about your alignment. But I think it's far more interesting to see the choices that you make as a player playing that character. That tells you a lot more about your alignment than who you like grew up while you were creating the character. And that's part of why I say like try to create your character and then pick a god who fits that thought, because on some level, once you have those things in mind with a paladin at least, on some level you have to kind of stick to that um
Yeah, so I looked up a bunch of gods and read through them all, and one caught my eye quite a while ago. So I've already been thinking about this for a while as we've been talking and listening. Um, Kel- Probably butchering the pronunciation, but
Kalimdor.
Kelenvor. Yes, and just the thought of the motivation of my character is that um, the level of death, life and death, is out of balance in this land that we're getting pulled to, and that is why I have to be drawn to it, is to rebalance it. I was thinking more of that. This is obviously like a dark god, or kind of like an equal god that gives me freedom to go both ways. But I was thinking more of like a dark mentality about it.
Yeah, Kalimvor is definitely a good choice. They are one of those gods who they make very interesting things happen because a paladin of Kalimvor can be very against resurrecting somebody who's died. There's a lot of room for you to interpret how those things work out. But yeah, that's sticking to a lawful neutral idea is one of those things where part of what I love about druids is that they are neutral characters. They're not lawful, but neutral characters will often see life and death as a natural part of existence. So there's a lot less room for, hey, our friend died, we need to save them, we need to try to find a way to revive them, where the like neutral character is just like, this is Kalimvor's like will. This was always meant to happen. And the druids over there like, yeah, everybody's body eventually becomes fertilizer. That's like how nature exists. So those are some of the like kind of funny aspects that come about from having certain choices like that, where you have a neutral character who's really like not all that into, oh, we failed to keep them healed like while they were alive, they're dead now. It's killing Void's will.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. And then also like noticing that obviously in an evil land like this, there might be like imbalances in death because of other like very evil characters or necromancy or whatever disturbing things are going on. So I feel like this character will have a lot of motivation to like both give context to the group and comment on the world around them.
It will work out quite interestingly.
So knowing that, I was trying to pick like a high dexterity character. I was trying to look at a paladin subclass that would help with that. But it seems like what one thing that I found harder about the subclass is it's picking certain spells, I believe. And that was the only like I know the story I'm looking for, but I didn't want to make a crap choice on the subclass that would like clash with the character.
Again, I think Paladins select their subclass at level 3, so you will have some time ahead of you before you're like pushed into that, and that'll be some level of um, almost homework for you to try to accomplish. There's very
Okay.
simple solutions if you have 0 time to do it. To fall back on, like Oath of Vengeance is probably the most popular Paladin type, and they are basically just like duel me. Like they're just like always trying to challenge the next person to fight them because they need to avenge whatever wrong.
Okay, if I have time on that, I'll be totally fine. I was just pressured. I was like, oh boy, that's the one thing I cannot really hard for me to jump into now.
Yeah, and that's going to be the thing for a lot of the subclasses. And again, there's certain classes that they have to make that subclass choice at level 1. There's certain classes that don't, that make it at 2, and then all of them have it by level 3. And I think I'm correct saying Paladins make it at 3. Yep, Sacred Oath is 3rd level. So there's a certain level of making that choice. You'll see some level of the spells that they have to choose, like that they get added um, to their paladin list. I think they're always prepared with a paladin. Instead of that, it's like new stuff added to the spells that you have. So that's one of those things, like when you have it always prepared, especially the big useful stuff, you never have to use your like preparing those number of spells to have those clutch ones. And that's the big part of like having it always prepared. But like just from the PHB ones, you're looking at like devotion is basically like, I mean, that fits perfectly well for the same idea of like devoting yourself to like the balance of life and death. And that gives you certain abilities and things. What you'll really want to look into, like just as like a quick little teaser to it, is try to get an idea of the channel divinity that the devotion gives you, and I think it's usually going to be the first one is a little bit more particular to your your subclass, and I think the second one is always going to be relatively the same, like turn undead. I could be wrong there, but like the channel divinity is like a big one to look at, and then those spell lists. I think those are the big ones, like initially, that are going to be the most effective on what your character becomes. Like the ancients seems to me like it has a little bit more kind of battlefield control on that initial spell list. Um, and then I think its channel divinity is kind of that same idea. So Oath of Devotion might give you a little bit more ability to enact your god's will. So a little bit more of a holy warrior, like a holy fanatic. The Oath of Ancients might be a little bit more controlling of the world around you for your god's sake. And then the Oath of Vengeance is trying to punish like particular people kind of before you, like bringing down the will of Kalimvor on those who defy his will. And those are just like the PHB ones.
Okay. And then for equipment and stuff like that, do I really have to get that granular on it? But is there something like obviously I'm trying to take like dexterity weapons?
Yeah, I feel like the big thing for you to look at equipment wise is to make sure to grab I feel like you can take like 3 martial weapons. Feel like you'll probably want like a rapier as your main weapon. That's going to be finesse. I'm assuming you're probably going to carry a shield, like you'll be shield and a rapier probably.
Potentially, that would probably be smart. I was just trying to look through the other weapons as well. I'd love to just involve a whip of some kind. I don't know if it's like a particularly effective one, but I'm just curious to bring it along, try and make it work.
On some level with that, I would say like you could eventually acquire a whip or acquire a whip with any extra gold that you have. The whip is probably not a good primary weapon, but you might find times where it is useful. But a lot of that will be like there's a certain level of action economy to change your weapon, whether you are dropping your rapier to draw your whip or whatnot. There's a certain level of switching between, but it's very up to you. If you want to be like a whip and a shield, that's fine. If you play if you start to get into two-handed fighting, like fighting with both weapons, you might want to look more towards the light weapons that can actually benefit for free to attack with both of them. Otherwise, there becomes a feat that you want to use to be able to fight with two weapons that are not necessarily light. So there's different interactions that kind of get into it based on what you're looking to do. But for what it's worth, the whip is an incredibly bad weapon.
Yeah, I was kind of getting that vibes doing super quick research, and I was a little disappointed, but I don't want to like force it if it's really bad on my first playthrough and be miserable because I'm like not effective. So maybe is there anything other than a rapier that a couple other options I could look at?
Well, as far as things go, like for finesse weapons, that already is a little bit more limited of a choice. And that's part of the thing about choosing to be dexterity based. You're going to be limiting yourself to more fast weapons. So it depends what you're looking for because like if you want to reflavor a rapier to something else, just not have to call it a rapier, that's fine. But if you're looking to have something that's doing like 2d6 slashing damage and you want to reflavor a rapier as a greatsword, that's where taking the dexterity hit and being an actual strength based paladin is what you really want to do. And that's
Okay.
like a big choice to make.
Yeah, no, I'm fine being the faster, quicker character. I know how you kind of like sacrifice some of the bigger, heavier stuff with it. So maybe we can just call it something else or have it. I'm just trying to look for a list of martial weapons and I'm having some trouble finding it. I think I had it before in another great place. Martial weapons. Okay. I'm seeing them now. It's just hard for me to tell. Should I be looking at more piercing and slashing instead of bludgeoning? Because obviously the bludgeonings are usually the strength and the two-handed style advantage.
Oh, in particular, you need to look at the finesse weapons, and that's part of the thing. The finesse weapons are already very limited. It's not even like the type of damage. I think most of the finesse weapons are going to be piercing, with a little bit of them are like slashing. You could actually also probably search in D&D Beyond just finesse, and that would show you too.
Okay, yeah, I'm sure when I get a list in front of me, it'll help, but it's just like I'm seeing descriptions of finesse weapons, not the actual list of finesse weapons, and it's frustrating me that I'm like, that's not very helpful.
So that weapons PDF I just posted there, that should just be the page of weapons. And basically, if you look down the right side under properties, there's what is it? Daggers, darts, and then it's rapier, scimitar, short sword, and whip. So those are effectively what is that, like 7 or 8 weapons that are actually finesse. And then that's one of those things. Like if you want it to be a katana, you can have your rapier be a katana that does a D8, and we could call it slashing damage, but effectively it's the rapier that you're using. And it's just a limited like finesse weapon.
Okay, yeah, just so we're in the same spirit and same stats. But it seems like the short sword, scimitar, rapier,
That's what you're looking at, yeah. Those are the ones that are even remotely like good damage and what you're looking for.
Yes.
Like if you decide to go, I think the Paladin has 2-weapon fighting as a fighting style. If you went 2-weapon fighting, if you used like there's no difference between short sword and scimitar. It's really stupid that they exist. But if you use the two of those, you can basically attack with your action and then use your bonus action to attack again with your offhand. And you would have +1 AC while you're using those two weapons. So it's almost like carrying a shield. It doubles the amount of damage that you can potentially do because you have 2 attacks now, which is huge at low levels. But if you take that fighting style, that's where having the finesse and the light weapons is very important because the light allows you, without the feat, to make a bonus action attack with your offhand.
Okay, that sounds more interesting to me. And would mixing in a dagger with a short sword be smart, or would that just be like making myself less powerful than a short sword and a dagger?
That's really where you're starting to hit yourself, and you're losing damage output purely for the thought of it. Um, that's one of those things where, like, once you have proficiency with martial weapons, you might as well just use the short swords. Like a rogue often has to use daggers because they only have the ability to start with a single short sword. So they're already kind of limited. Like as a starting character, they have to acquire a short sword. Whereas, like just off the top of my head, I feel like the paladin has the opportunity to start with better starting equipment.
Okay, can we just do 2 short swords? Is that possible?
Yeah, I mean, if you're going for that, I think that's entirely within what you're able to start with. There's no like homebrew or folding to make that happen. It just is.
Okay. All right. We'll do that because the whip and the dagger stuff, even though it might fit with the character, just seems like it's too relatively weak to start out with. Maybe I'll acquire a whip later or something and fit it in there.
Yeah, like the acquiring of the whip would be more once you start to get a feel for the mechanics of like using multiple weapons, you might see the need to have like that the reach is like an extra 5 foot square where you could attack something a little bit further away from you. That's kind of going to be the big thing there is to actually use that reach, but it's a big hit to damage. Yeah, so I think, yeah, because you can start with 2 martial weapons, and then you would have the choice of 5 javelins or a simple weapon, um, simple melee weapon. And then, yeah, you have defense, I feel like, is probably your fighting styles can kind of let you play around with how that works. I don't see 2 weapon fighting for the paladin, though. That must be a fighter skill, or you get it later. Um, I still don't see yours yet, Brandon, but just as a callback to Rodney and with Jim, I haven't actually looked over your characters to see, but I am perfectly okay with variant humans. So if you guys selected humans and you don't want all of the stats, you have access to feats. Once you select a human, you can use a variant human.
Do plain humans not get feats or?
Well, if you don't select the actual variant one, you get like +1 to all of your stats instead of access to the feat. It's basically the only difference between them. Yeah, so it looks like you selected the plain human. So in the long run, you gain like quite a few different stats, but realistically with so many even stats from the roll, there's not really too much of a reason to actually play the normal human unless you in particular wanted to max a lot of extra skills or a lot of extra stats.
So it's just a small stat difference. I had that same question as well, like picking human versus variant human.
Yeah, variant human gets 2 stats. They get a feat which a feat at level 1 is huge. And then they gain like a few languages and a skill. It's very the big thing is instead of those 4 extra stat points, you are gaining a feat. That's the big thing to keep in mind. And I know we're already kind of way later than things in general, but if everybody is still here right now, can I have you all roll hit points?
Yeah, I was actually going to ask about that.
So, right now, I feel like Barbarian is a D12, Paladin, I think, is a D10 offhand, and then I think Ranger is a D10, and I think the Sorcerer is a D6. And you can just /R space 1 that number, or on that left side of the screen, you can click on the polyhedron and select the coinciding number. So with your D8 there, for what was it? It was L.
That was Ollie.
Ollie.
Yeah.
Yeah, when you go into your like editing your character in that third tab for class, to the top and to the right, you'll see manage hit points, and you just want to make sure that rolled hit points is set at 8, and then it will add your Constitution. I still don't have your character in the campaign, Brandon, but you'll just do that same thing.
Yeah, so I'm just like I'm in the D&D Beyond, and there's all this shitload of equipment and stuff like that. I have almost everything ready. I'm just a little overwhelmed with the equipment. I'm like, is adding a bunch of stuff not good? I don't know how much I'm allowed to add. I just added a short sword, but I'm
Did
just
you
like,
go beyond just like the starting equipment? Because you might be just adding too much after that.
I literally just added a short sword, and then I'm going and taking away the other weapons. So should I just give myself 2 short swords? Is that okay, or do I need to get a shield just with the paladin rules?
Well, your choice was basically a martial weapon and a shield, or 2 martials. So you can take 2 short swords. You just can't have a shield unless you actually spend the gold to purchase one, basically.
Okay, I've got that. All right, and just confirming, like taking 2 weapons, I'm not screwing myself so much. I'm just going to massacre myself because I can't. I can still defend somewhat, just not as well.
Low level. I think it is better for martial classes to have 2 weapons so they can attack twice, because at level 5 you get your extra attack, and then you're potentially able to attack 3 times. But again, one of the things that I want to instill is like that target priority of killing stuff is better than not getting hit, which is better than not like is better than healing somebody. You want to remove your enemies as soon as possible. Um, Often I see people create a martial class, and at low levels, stuff doesn't have a lot of hit points. So they're like trying to swing a pole arm to do like 2d6 damage or a d12 damage, and it's a creature with 5 health. If they miss, they do nothing. Whereas if you have 2 short swords, you've got 2 chances to kill that creature. And if you kill it on the first chance, you have another chance to kill another creature. Usually starting off having 2 light weapons, 2 short swords is the best choice.
Okay, and then with a dagger or javelins, is that my choice basically? If I want something to be able to kind of throw.
Yeah, I would say you want to take those 5 javelins with that other choice. Usually that other choice gives you some sort of ranged thought, and the javelins are a little bit better of a choice. Anything you throw is dexterity based, though. You don't need finesse to make those like use your dexterity.
Okay, I think I'm ready to put my character in the game, but one thing I don't understand is the like let me check if it's under, is it description?
Nothing's going to change once you add the character to the game. You'll just have access to like subclass stuff that you don't have access to right now.
Yeah, it's really easy to go back and edit too. Like I've
Okay,
changed a
all right.
couple major things since saving my character
I
initially.
want to get in and out of D&D Beyond, honestly. So how do I do that? How do I get to the next step?
Well, right before, like at 10 p.m., I posted the D&D Beyond link in Discord. If you click that, it should take you back to D&D Beyond, and it'll probably say, do you want to join with one of these characters, or would you like to create a new character?
Okay, so I should leave Roll20 and then
I mean, if you have multiple tabs open, there's no reason to leave Roll20. Caitlin, that link that I just dropped for rolladvantage.com token stamps, if you drop your barbarian into that, it'll give you a circle around her that you can kind of adjust it and make a actual token stamp on the right side of the screen. You can either save it like that or just right click and save it.
Oh, cool. I didn't even mean to send that into the chat. I pressed a button and there it is now. So,
Yeah, that
but
was
thank
my
you.
mistake. But like once you have the circle around them, you can just go into your character where it says Kate under the journal players characters. And if you click edit, you can drop the circle token into the avatar.
Oh, cool. Thanks.
So is that after dropping an image in and then downloading it?
Yeah. If you drop it into the token stamp thing, like on the right side, you'll see like a PNG like preview of it with like the checkered flag kind of behind it. And you either just want to right click save that as a PNG, or I think it actually asks you below, like, do you want to save it as a PNG? Yeah. Towards the bottom, like I think download, but I just always right click the actual image.
And then that's in Roll20. Where do you load that up?
In the top right, you'll see your journal. It looks like the little newspaper tab. When you select that, you'll see the characters player as a little drop down. You can just click the plus, and then if you click characters, just click the plus. You should then see. I feel like voice wise, that was Jim.
Yes.
Yep, just click Jim and then click edit, and you'll see the avatar. So that's that little picture that I just uploaded to Discord. You can see like those important parts of it.
I also renamed the character. Do you want us to keep our names for clarity's sake early on, or?
No. Again, like once we start playing this, you guys are going to be your characters. I'm going to learn your names pretty quickly here. I'm going to attach your voices to your voices. I'm going to attach your voices to those two names pretty quick.
And then I didn't catch. What should I roll for hit points for a sorcerer?
Sorcerer is a D6.
Oof.
Did you roll a 1? Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, you're supposed to feel squishy. That's one of those things where I always want to remind people, I don't intend to kill you. Your character may die. If your character dies, I want it to be because the dice betrayed you or because you made a bad decision. I am very open to, if you die, oh, my twin was over here in the mist and they've walked out and they would like to join the party. One of my favorite movies that like plays on that trope is Beer Fest, where the one brother like dies, they bring in his other brother, the same actor, and eventually he's like, "Oh yeah, would you guys call me Dumpster or something like that?" He's like, "Please just call me his name. It would be so much nicer for me to like embody this quest." And that cracks me up. That's how I am. That's how I imagine a lot of these things, where it's just funny to imagine. Yep, I still want to play this character. It sucks they died. We're gonna call him a different name and play the exact same thing over again.
And then I'm not seeing how to change the max hit points.
So you shouldn't have to edit the max hit points, but if you go into okay, I still have to edit some of these things because I see at least Ali is on fix. Because
Yeah, I
we'll
can add
get
modifiers and adjust the current or like temp hit points, but I can't change the max from what it was generated as.
Yeah, so on the home screen, I'll have to modify some of those. You want to be on rolled instead of like the automatic. You want it on manual, and then once you have it on manual, you can select the override. So Ali, if you reload your character, it should be correct right now because overriding can ignore stuff that is important.
Sorry, can you say that again, Mara?
So like if you reload Ollie right now, I switched on the home screen from I can't think of the actual name of it, but I switched the hit points to manual, which means that you're rolling for them, and I changed your rolled hit points to 8. When you have it overrided to 8 hit points, it ignores your constitution. That rolled hit points is important because we'll continue to add to that, and then the game automatically adds your constitution bonus to that. So if you look at Ali, your hit points are actually 9.
Okay. Where do I reload that at, I guess?
Oh, I think it might just be a problem because we're both on it. So if you reload your character and go into that class tab and look at your manage hit points, tell me what happens when you like click manage hit points.
Okay, give me 1 second.
Oh yeah, you're golden.
Okay, this is Brendan. I'm still trying. I like put my character into what I feel like is the next instruction you told me, but I'm not seeing it at all in D&D Beyond yet, and I'm getting a bit frustrated.
Hector?
Yes, is Hector around yet? Because I don't see him. Okay, great, but I don't see him as like a play. I don't see him in Roll20 yet, and so I'm like, what the hell is
Yeah,
going on?
he's not set up in Roll20 yet. Right now in Roll20, if you go to the journal, you should be able to see just Brendan. You'll have to like actually switch the name to Hector. That's the difference of like they're still two separate programs. They're not linked together.
Okay, all right. Sorry, I was getting confused. So,
No,
should
yeah,
I
you're
just go
good.
copy over a lot of the stats I had already kind of just already set up?
No, Beyond 20 is going to do all of that. So once your character is all set, if you scroll over like an attack, it's going to show you a polyhedron, like a red die. And if you click on that die, that dice is going to get sent over to Roll20. So like I'm still on Ali just because I opened it. If I select over medicine and click the red B, that die should show up on Roll20, and you guys can see that medicine check that I just rolled. But that was all rolled on D&D Beyond.
Okay, I saw that happen once for me. I just don't see anything about Hector over here, so that's why I'm like getting really confused because we had pre-made characters last time, and
Like on D&D Beyond, you don't see Hector?
or I do in D&D Beyond. I guess Roll20. So the Brendan, we're going to edit a lot of Brendan. We're going to delete that name later, and Hector is going to come into there.
Yeah, all you have to do there is once you have a picture in mind for your character, you'll drop the avatar in. You can actually see it with Kate and Edwin right now. So what is that? That is Jim has already renamed Jim into Edwin, and then he dropped his picture on there. Kate has not named. I think she's baby, Rebby, something. Debbie. I knew it was something like that. Kate has not renamed Debbie from Kate, but like I named it Kate. But that's all it is. All you will need there is the name. Exactly. You just did Hector. And then once you have a picture, you'll drop the picture into the avatar in that same edit screen. And that's all you will do in Roll20. Once those characters are set, you'll drag them out and they're ready to play on the board. I don't like Roll20 and I didn't want to buy any of their content because I can't save your character sheets as PDFs. And playing offline in person, it is insane not to be able to use the digital resource to create PDFs. That is one of the biggest things that I just looked at Roll20 and I have always wanted to leave their site. D&D Beyond, I was not happy about buying books for a second time, but the fact that I can save your character sheets as PDFs is huge, and you guys can do it as well.
I actually did that with from the one shot side. Because I don't have premium or whatever it is, so I was limited to 6 character slots, and I had to delete some to make this one. So I made sure to download them first for future reference.
One of my players in my in one of my other games, she has a bunch of characters, and she had an issue with her subscription, and it blew my mind that she was paying D&D Beyond to basically theory craft characters for herself. But that's one of the things I suggested. It was like, don't hesitate to create guys and then just like turn them into a PDF that you have on your computer and get rid of it. Like, you don't have to pay them just the theory craft. Keep the characters that you need to play, but you can create as many as you would like just playing around, as long as you just save them as a character sheet. When you went into, go ahead, Brandon.
Where am I dragging the picture? I've been trying for like 20 damn minutes to get the picture in. I'm sorry.
Did you do the token stamp 2 thing?
Yeah, token stamp 2 is like 2 up in Discord. The link to that. And then once you send it through the token stamp, you'll just go back to where you change your name to Hector. And if you go into edit, you'll see drop a file from your art library or computer in the top left for your avatar.
I'm sorry, I'm probably gonna have you repeat that. I just finished doing everything for Ollie. I was looking at the hit points. It shows that I have 11 for hit points, which I thought I had updated, but I guess it wasn't applied.
Yeah, but you had the override max. When you went into your class and you modify hit points, what do you see in there right now?
So what I see right now is the rolled HP is 10, an HP modifier, override HP. I had originally put override HP at 8, and then I hit apply. And I thought that had applied, but I guess not.
Well, I got rid of the override HP, so that was part of it, but it was having an issue because we were both on your character. Can I either have you leave D&D Beyond for a moment, and I'll get it set? Otherwise, if you try changing that rolled hit points to 8, that should give you the proper 9 hit points that you should have.
Yep, I just did that actually.
So theoretically, that should be fine because I think it's not set to the non-rolling. Yep, I see you at 9 hit points now. That looks correct.
Awesome. And then how do I go about importing the character?
To save it as a PDF.
I'll do that.
What do you mean, like to D&D Beyond or to Roll20?
Roll20 I'm talking about.
Yeah, so everything we're gonna do, when we play, you're gonna have 2 different sites open: D&D Beyond with your character, and then Roll20.
Okay. So in terms of managing my character and sheet like that, it'll all be on D&D Beyond.
Yeah. So like if you go to roll an attack,
Uh-huh.
let's see if you've got, right now you don't have anything equipped. So if you go down and you equip your longbow and then go back to your actions, Do you see the longbow show up as your actions?
Am I equipping this within D&D Beyond?
Yeah, my bad. If you go into your inventory to the right of your actions, it's kind of that like central right side of the screen in D&D Beyond. You'll see actions, inventory, features.
Yeah, I'm in inventory now.
And if you scroll down to your longbow and you click to equip it, you should then see a longbow attack in your actions.
To equip it, actually, there it goes. I think it was just for whatever reason it wasn't showing it clicked for a second there. Okay, so I have it selected now that I can see. All right. And then I guess what do I do once because right now it shows it as being checked.
Like on the left side of longbow, that box right by it has a check
Yeah,
through it now.
it's checked.
So if you go to your actions, you should be able to see the longbow there. And to the left of the name longbow, you should see a little, like, it looks like a hot hot art. I can't think of the name of it, but a little piece of art to the left of the name longbow. And if you hover over that, you'll see a red B. If you click the B, that's going to roll a longbow attack over on Roll20. Yeah, so before you do that picture with Hector, though, I want you to run that through the token stamp so it's a circle.
That would make sense. Did you link the token stamp?
Yep, over in Roll20, it's the most current one.
So am I supposed to be seeing the longbow within Roll20?
Once you click the attack, yes, you should see an attack.
Because right now the only thing I see is how do you want to create this character within Roll20?
When you click something on D&D Beyond, you see that?
No, this is within Roll20. If I try to click into my character bio and character sheet.
Yeah, you don't need any of that on Roll20.
Okay.
Roll20 is just going to be your character's name and the picture. That's all you need there.
So we basically just want to have the D&D Beyond character sheet up, and that way, like, the extension gets around having to use it inside of Roll20 at all.
Correct. D&D Beyond does everything. Beyond 20 links the two together, so those dice rolls happen.
So I believe that was me that just did the dice roll. Yeah, for a longbow. Okay.
I actually had my edit character open in 2 tabs, so if you want to fix my hit points now, I should be like backed out of everything.
Gotcha. Yeah, I was just taking a look at Debbie, right? So she actually rolled max. So I'm going to switch that over to manual, and then that'll still be perfect. And then anybody who is using 2-weapon fighting, at some point during this week, I will create your off-weapon attack, because basically you'll like change one of those weapons. As your off weapon, it doesn't add your stat to the attack, so it'll give you a bonus action on that action thing, and that'll kind of change a few things. It looks like Debbie added everything twice for your starting equipment, though. You got 2 of everything.
I did. I was wondering why it kept asking me twice in like 2 different sections, but I didn't think it would just add everything twice.
Yeah, one of the funny things about these things is they don't know the rules. They can somewhat operate on them, but they definitely don't know the actual rules.
Got it. So should I just go in and like manually take that out then?
It kind of works both ways. In the long run, Either I can at some point or you can, but yeah, it's up to you.
And then, are there any like limits or guidelines on what spells I start with?
Under your spell tab, you should be able to look and see, and that'll give you an idea of what you have access to. As far as it'll go for level 1, you'll have a choice of. I feel like sorcerers have a fixed number of cantrips, so I think you'll have like 2 cantrips and then like 3 spells, and I think you have 2 spell slots, something like that.
Oh yeah, I see it now. Yeah, it's 2 spells and 4 cantrips.
So if you reload Edwin, you should see that he's at 7 hit points. I think you rolled a 4. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that looks right now.
And then what is it? It's going to be. Yeah, so it's a lot easier for me to kind of modify some of these things after we're all off it. But it looks like everybody's gone pretty well through like the actual character creation. If I ask you for a nature check, can everybody roll me a nature check?
Will I find that in the character sheet? Where am I locating that?
Yep, central part of the character sheet, you'll see all of the different skills. It's just like a tall central column that runs down. Bam, crushing it. And then if I ask for like an intelligence check, do you all see the difference between like intelligence and one of those skills that uses intelligence? Excellent. Excellent. Yeah. So those are the big ones. That's like the big kind of stuff there. With a save, when it comes time to roll saves, the big difference will be. Oh yeah, okay. I didn't actually pay attention. 2 of you did roll saves. If you actually look to your intelligence stat, you can actually scroll over. I think the lower number should bring up the D20, where you can roll an intelligence check versus an intelligence save. The only difference is going to matter when your character actually has proficiency in intelligence saves. Anytime we have a misrolled die, we will always take the first roll die. So if I ask for an intelligence check and you roll an intelligence save or you roll like an investigation, we're going to take that first roll die, and that's what's going to matter. We'll just apply the correct modifier to it once we figure out what that difference is. And in the long run, that will work good and bad equally because it's always still just the first die. Sometimes you might have a nat 20, sometimes it might be a nat 1. You'll never really, it doesn't work against anybody to roll incorrectly. It's still always just the d20 that we take. Inside of roll 20, does everybody see the red B at the bottom of the screen, bottom right?
Yeah, within the chat window.
Yep. If
Yes.
you right click on that, and that should give you a options choice. My bad. Maybe not right click. Yeah, left click. My bad. And then towards the bottom, more options. Or towards the middle. Once you're inside of there, you'll see that there's type of roll, and then in quotations, advantage, disadvantage. Can you make sure that on the right side that says always roll twice? And then I think 3 down below that, you should see auto roll, damage, and crit. And just make sure that that's toggled to the right side in blue. And basically what those will do is when you roll, you're always going to roll 2 dice. So it covers advantage or disadvantage. And then when you roll to attack, it's always going to roll the damage as well.
And those are the only two things that we need to update within those beyond 20 settings, right?
Those are the most important ones. There's definitely some issues at times where like having dice roll in D&D Beyond can be problematic, but it's not a big deal. I turn all of those things off to try not to cause the problems. But basically, D&D Beyond is close to making their own virtual tabletop, and all of the editing that they do, it makes issues here and there. But those are the two important ones as far as like our gameplay goes. If you ever notice that you make an attack and it doesn't show damage, yeah, like those longbow. Yeah, so the longbow that Rodney was sending, it didn't actually roll the attack part of that. Those are just damage. But like if you roll the other side of it with just the attack and no damage, it'll show you longbow in pink, and you can click on that longbow to roll the dice. In the long run, it's basically we need to get all of those out as soon as possible. But those are the two important ones because they try to cover everything in one go. So I think it might be my push to talk that makes it. Yeah, so without alt pressed, that's the longbow attack. The second one was with alt press, so it takes away the advantage, disadvantage, but that's left of longbow on your character sheet.
And just double checking, I mean, I don't have like any of my stats in yet. In Roll20, is that fine? Are we supposed
Yeah,
to?
we're not putting stats in there.
Okay.
Yep, nothing needs filled out in Roll20 other than your name and the picture of your character.
Awesome.
Yeah, so right now, all 4 of you have your characters fully done and set for Roll20. That's all you're pretty much ever going to do in Roll20 with them.
So really quick, Ollie, you said with I guess doing an actual attack with an item. How do I do that? Because if I just click on like short sword or longbow or whatever it might be, it comes up, and then I just have to click the Beyond 20 link. Is that not the right way to do it?
If you see to the left of where it says longbow, it has like a little white drawing of a bow. If you click on that bow or hover over that bow, it's going to give you an attack key. Just like it's a like a rouge, like a my brain is burning. I'm fried. I think it shows a 2.
I'm not seeing anything.
I am going to share my screen here, and so you guys can look in roll or on Discord and actually see on my screen. And that might make it a little bit easier. Do you see where I'm at on your character?
Yeah, I see where you're at on my character.
Oh wait, am I sharing it only with you?
I see it.
I'm able to see it.
Yeah, we just have
Okay.
to get into the chat, and it takes a little time. So I'm looking at it.
Okay.
Oh, I feel like maybe. Oh, it's saying Ali because I'm sharing the screen. I'm on that character. So on the left side of the longbow is where it shows that. That's just one way to make the attack, and pressing Alt removes the advantage disadvantage. Um, but when I don't have actually here, when I use my shift, all it does is it reduces all of your volumes. Oh, it still alters it though.
Yeah, I think I see what you mean now. The problem that I had is I was actually within the inventory tab. I wasn't in the actions tab, so I had to go to the actions tab, and then once I did that, I saw the bow.
Gotcha. Yeah, so I feel like what also you can do is if you click on the longbow, you'll bring up this thing on the right, and I think that button seemed to do it too. But yeah, there's a lot of different ways to come about things. Um,
Yeah, that's how I was doing. I was clicking it from within inventory and then rolling from the right there in inventory.
yeah, so there's just a lot of different ways to cause things to happen. One clutch thing, I'm going to pop over to Edwin. Pretty much anybody can do these at different times, but if you ever go to use a spell and I ask you to show it to us, this display in VTT, that just means display it on the virtual tabletop, and that sends the whole spell list over to Roll20. Or not the whole spell list, but it sends the spell over there. And then realistically, again, if you click that, where anywhere it says pink means that you can roll those dice. So if I go to cast it, and it's a cantrip, so there's no spell slot, so you can post that. I'll be able to read the spell, and then he can roll the damage just with that d6. So like it's not as I don't think it's as important for you to have stuff equipped just to equip it. I think it can be important for remembering the action economy to only equip what you're actually carrying. There's not necessarily a reason for you as a sorcerer not to have like your crossbow ready. In general, you're probably always going to cast a damaging cantrip and not necessarily shoot a crossbow bolt. Um, but like that's one of those things that I feel like, depending on how much you want to upkeep your character, you can modify what you're actually carrying. It technically takes some effort to stow and pull out things, so you can't always just be carrying two daggers, two short swords, a shield, and your longbow. Yeah, so I think those are the big things. Does anybody have any questions offhand right now?
Is the best way is to kind of read through others' character sheets just by clicking in the campaign within D&D Beyond?
Yeah, I think you guys probably have the same view where if you look at the top right of your character, you can see the campaign. You can go back to the campaign. And then I think you can look over. I don't think I have it set to where the characters are hidden. So you should have access to everything. I don't think you can edit them. I think only I can edit them. But I think that's one of those things. That's a way for you to do it. If everybody wants to use that Google Drive, I don't think that's necessarily a bad idea. But I just wanted to point out, like, if you guys want to reduce what you're doing so you're not doing anything redundantly, um, once you do it on your character sheet, that's done and set for everyone.
Okay, yeah, that works for me. I just went to the campaign and it just pulls up on the right all the different characters.
Yeah, so again, like from Hector's, I feel like if you can fill out the actual backstory here, that is perfectly functional for me to have access to your backstory. But I feel like that covers a lot of the stuff. Again, I like to run games meant for showing new people the game, so I don't expect you to know everything off the bat. A lot of how we'll play is with that introduction to it. So like when it comes time for us to roll initiative, we'll roll a little slower and I'll try to walk everybody through. If you end up with questions, never hesitate to ask. Um, just as like a side thing for like simplicity's sake, if I go to ask you to roll initiative, I click on Hector here, so I'm clicked on his tab, and then if I click on the initiative, it'll add him into the initiative. And when you look at that 7.17, that's telling me as the DM that his dexterity is 17. So if there's multiple people who roll sevens, I know where like the tiebreaker is. And that again, that might not be how it's exactly set for everybody at present, but like that's one of the things how I have it set in Beyond 20, because it's just kind of like a subtle, useful thing. Does anyone have any questions right now? Is everyone exhausted?
A little bit.
Yeah, I feel like I have my characters set up enough and everything connected. Was there a place we were gonna add like our character background or?
I think we were just going to add it within D&D Beyond within the notes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's where I think the best place to do is in the notes there. And then as well, one of the things is like you guys inside of like this Discord, inside I don't care if you guys chat in the other Discord, like inside of that Curse of Strahd chat below us here, you guys can share backstories there as well, because I do want you to try to take some time, um, like even if it's in the real world. I'm not sure how close all of you are to each other, but depending on how you do things, in the notes is a place for me to access them. Like I do everything in OneNote for campaigns, so I will end up saving this description page basically from your background all the way down through your flaws in appearance. And then if you have things filled out for your notes, that all gets saved into your character sheet in my notes. So I have access. So when I'm plotting and planning, I can try to include you that way. And that's another one of those things where the more you include it here, the more I am able to include it in the game.
Is that under description or features and traits or all? How do I bring up that backstory? Notes?
Yep, under notes.
All right, I'll take out the ones I took in Roll20 and start putting that back in here.
Yeah, I mean, I have access to them in Roll22. I wouldn't necessarily check for them there, but there's on occasion times where I will be inside of your character and I will notice things like that. So, yeah, I mean, that's the type of thing. You can add Kellen Vor under your description. And that solves, like, that's right there. Like on some level you can, like, the more you fill in all of these things, like one of the first things that I have a group do is when you see somebody new, I'm going to have you describe yourself. So whether it just includes like pulling up the picture of yourself, where you describe yourself from that actual picture that you have, um, there's going to be those levels of, I like the first impression is always just that 30 to 50 feet away physical description. Adventurers are definitely going to see weapons that you're carrying, kind of things. And a lot of those things are going to clue you into what you're looking at. So when you all look at somebody like Edwin, you're going to get a completely different understanding from Edwin than you will from Debbie, than you will from Allie, because you're going to see all of those different weapons. You'll see Edwin looks like a normal person. There's nothing to make him look different than anybody else. And if he's out there risking his life, a lot of people aren't necessarily going to be surprised when they see him starting to sling magic. Um, and with a barbarian, it's kind of the same thing when you see somebody who's carrying like 95 weapons and no armor. You see somebody who you're like, yep, that's a wildling. Probably don't want to stand too close or she might chop my head off. So if everybody is good to go,
Your audio just cut off when you stopped sharing the screen. You said something everywhere.
I think he might have accidentally dropped.
Yeah, he accidentally quit the chat. I'm sure he'll figure it out in a second and come back in.
Yeah, I'll probably update my character bio tomorrow. I'll let you guys know probably within the Curse of Strahd text chat when I do.
I mean, I think he was pretty much finishing up and saying goodbye, but
Glad that we were able to get through all of that. I know it's kind of a lot to start off with, but at least we have like our characters and everything built.
oh, I think I dropped from Discord. I'm not sure the last thing that you all heard there.
The last thing that we heard
you
was
literally were starting to say like, "Hey," like finishing up and stuff. And you dropped like almost immediately when you ended the visual stream.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I didn't realize that that did it like that. So it must have been like a super hang up. Yeah, I was just saying like I appreciate all of your attention. I hope anybody, if you end up with any other questions, please don't hesitate to ask me. But I appreciate your time tonight. I hope you all have a great week here, and we'll get this kicked off next week. But otherwise, I don't expect any session to ever go this long. I will do everything I can to limit ourselves to 3 hours, and we'll probably be pretty solid at like 2.5 hours at the max.
I appreciate your time, Mara. I know, kind of getting set up, it took us a little longer just since we haven't played that much.
This is what I count on. Again, I would have preferred if we had all 6 people here, so everybody's on the same level. But in the long run, yeah, this is what session zeros are, and it's a lot more talking than I am used to. It is ideal for me to create the setting that you all interact with each other. I don't know if anybody can hear it in my voice, but my voice has been wishing. But this is what session zeros are. They almost always are that extra strain of it really is. It feels a lot like me teaching in front of a classroom.
Well, we appreciate all the help getting set up. I know I'm excited to start playing next week.
Yeah, me as well.
Same.
Yeah, I am, and I'll get Theo, Sir Tedwin on Discord to create a character. I'm sure they'll be in. They're very, very experienced, so they don't need really any help creating a character.
Yeah, I think the big things will also be to point out the different like little things that I have in there, like that character sheet thing to contact me if they want to do different things. That's usually one of the big things. Like playing with DMs is one of those things where it's either somebody who is the best of players or it's somebody who wants to exploit the game. And without an understanding of where you all are, somebody who wants to exploit the game can make it. That's what I was like kind of describing, where it's like I'm either never going to challenge Theo or it could make stuff really difficult for all of you. And that's one of those things where I feel like you have to kind of try to balance things to understand what the group is looking for. Um, and they're not necessarily problematic players, but it's one of those things to try to get the group on the same level of what everybody's looking for challenge wise. Because over time, I will feel out the challenge of the group, whereas like a particular player may feel left out because they're too powerful. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I'll talk to him about it. I don't think it's going to be an issue. We'll figure it out.
Yeah, like I feel like 80% of the DMs that I've played with end up being some of my favorite players, because often DMs recognize, like, especially if like Theo's DM'd Curse of Strahd, often a DM is the person who like sits back, and then when there's like a lull and the story starts to slow and the group isn't making a decision, they'll be the person who makes the decision. Often a DM is the person who doesn't make like all of the most optimal choices. They can be a very wild card player. And it's a lot of fun to have when you have that person who recognizes, like, if I'm putting a choice to you all as a group and nobody's making the decision, he'll like stand forward and basically rush in, and the decision's made. You guys have to now follow him.
Okay, yeah, Theo has never DM'd before, but played in a lot of different campaigns with some very creative DMs. And
I just looked at my phone. Tony got back to me. This was about maybe like an hour ago, and he said he was down with playing a cleric.
Was Tony the one who DM'd? I felt like you guys had one person who was an experienced DM.
That was actually oh man, why am I blanking on his name?
That was Kruger?
Yeah, that was Kruger.
Gotcha. Yeah, I actually played with him this last weekend. I did a little one shot he joined in on.
Yeah, I actually saw that. He's a pretty cool guy.
Yeah, it was rather funny, and I definitely got the impression he 100% knew the dungeon that we were inside of, and the description of how I say like a positive DM can exist in a group. He was definitely good at being that positive DM. Because one thing about like spoiling stuff is, if you know the answer to something, it is best for you to be quiet and let everybody else enjoy it from their ignorance. And he was very good at doing that, because when things hit a lull and the group wasn't making a decision, he would push forward. But when certain things like were going different ways, he was a wild card, and it was a lot of fun. Yeah, but it got cut short because I feel like his wife called him partway through, and they went and saw Dune on an IMAX, which I'm very jealous of, because I bet you that was amazing.
Yeah, that sounds pretty amazing. But yeah, I mean, if I might be able to get together with Tony this week before next. I don't know if he'll join or not next week, but at least if I can get with him, I can help him kind of get caught up, just like Theo.
Sounds good. And same thing, like it. As far as things go, I can make myself available pretty regularly, and with one person, it can often be a lot quicker to run through stuff.
Okay, I'll let him know.
So thank you all. Have wonderful evenings here, and I will catch you all on the flip side.
all right, thanks so much. Good night.
See y'all
Thank you.
later.
All right. See you, everybody.